Hello, and thank you for listening to the 136th episode of Congressional Dish. I'm your host, Jennifer Briney. So today's episode is about two bills that became a law, and one of them is quite important. This is the bill that funds our government until December 9th. Because you see, our government is supposed to be funded by September 30th every year. And the way this is supposed to work is that 12 different committees carefully craft 12 different appropriations bills. Appropriations is funding. But they're supposed to have 12 different bills funding 12 different parts of our government. And then 12 different laws are supposed to be signed by September 30th. And that's how our government is supposed to be funded. And I have not seen that happen in 4 years of doing Congressional Dish. And from what I've heard, it hasn't happened in a much longer time than that, but in my own experience, I only have 4 years. Regardless, this year was no different. They did not finish their job on time, although I do have to say that we are slightly better than last year. Last year, by September 30th, they finished exactly 0 of these government funding laws. This year, they finished 1, which is the Military Construction and Veterans Administration funding. And so we're going to look into that and see what our plans are for building stuff by the military in 2017, and then also how we're taking care of our veterans. Also, there was some Zika money in there, so we'll look at that too. The second bill I'm going to talk about is really just because you guys have been asking about it, but there was a bill that was signed into law, which the media has been saying allows 9/11 victims to sue Saudi Arabia. So that's the media line. That is not quite exactly what happened here, and so we will look into that bill. And yes, of course, I read the 28 pages from the 9/11 report. This was a report that was done by Congress, and these 28 pages have been classified for many, many years. And so those were released, which brought us down this whole path with this being the 15-year anniversary of 9/11, where Congress passed this law basically to say that they're doing something for the victims. But surprise, surprise, what they're doing is not what you think it is. So those are the two bills that we're going to be talking about today. However, before we get started on those two laws, I do have to admit a ginormous mistake that I made in the Electoral College episode, and I am so sorry because I've led some of you to spread some bullshit around the country for a few weeks, and it was definitely not on purpose, and I'm hoping to fix that now. But just, I found out that I made this mistake in the Electoral College episode, and I was trying to figure out what the right thing to do was. And so what I decided to do, and what I did do, is I went back and I changed the Electoral College episode so that anyone who downloaded it after I caught the mistake, or actually after listener Michael told me about my mistake, but after that happened, and by the way, thank you, Michael, I do appreciate you checking my work. But after that happened, I got the correct information and I fixed the episode. So anyone who downloaded the episode after the mistake was caught, you got the correct information. Anyone who downloaded it before that, I am sorry. And to help you figure out the odds of whether or not you were a victim of my bullshit peddling or not, the way it worked out is that basically everyone who downloaded the Electoral College episode in September got the wrong version. And everyone who downloaded it since October started got the right one. And just so you know the numbers, there are about 8,500 devices who downloaded the wrong version out of about 10,000 who have downloaded it since this recording. So that's 85% of you got the wrong information. And again, I'm really sorry. But since I think a good chunk of you eager beaver early downloaders are going to hear this, let me lead you back down an accurate path. And this will be quick, I promise. What I was basically trying to get across in the Electoral College episode is that the Electoral College determines our president. And when we vote, our votes don't really count directly. Our votes are suggestions for 538 electors who are human beings who vote for the president. And yes, they can and have gone off the rails and voted however they felt like it. But assuming the electors don't go off the rails and they do respect the will of the voters, which is what happens most of the time. As long as the electors are voting our will, a candidate can become president when they get a total of 271 electors out of 538, when they get more than half. However, if no candidate gets 271 electors, then the House of Representatives picks the president. On the House of Representatives ballot, there will be the names of 3 candidates, not 2, who get the most electors. So the House of Representatives would get a choice of 3. But here's where I fucked up. The election in the House of Representatives will be on the first day of the next Congress, not this one. And so in the original version of Congressional Dish 133, I said that it would be this 114th Congress that would be doing the voting, and that's just not true. And I'm really, really sorry. And so what that means, though, is that we actually have even more power than I realized to determine who would be the president if this scenario even played out. I mean, at this point in the election, we still have a month to go, but it looks like Hillary is going to slaughter Donald Trump in the Electoral College. And so this might all be moot. But if it is a close election, we still get to decide on November 8th who the House of Representatives will be, which makes your vote in the House of Representatives the most important one you have, hands down, because it not only determines who will be controlling the money and who controls declarations of war, not that we do those anymore, but we certainly could with a good House of Representatives, but the House of Representatives might also be determining your next president. So it could not be more important for you to pay attention and think about your vote for Congress, and more than anything, show up and vote for Congress. So yes, I was wrong, but this is wrong in a kind of awesome way because it means that we actually have more power than I thought when I recorded that episode. So at least there's kind of a silver lining. And, it turned out after realizing the mistake that it didn't really change the calculation too much for how this could go down this year. I mean, in that episode, my goal in that episode was to tell you how the Electoral College works. And I thought it would be more interesting if I tied it to this election. I wasn't trying to start a debate over who the best president would be, I swear. But with this particular election, the calculations that I'm making at this point is that if the Democrats have more states in the next House of Representatives, I mean, Hillary Clinton would be president regardless of who the third name on the House of Representatives ballot would be. I mean, they're just completely united behind her. But if the Republicans have a majority, a lot of Republicans don't like Trump. And so I still think that Gary Johnson's chances are dramatically higher than Jill Stein's because of that dynamic. Because if a Republican House of Representatives was given the choice of Trump, Clinton, or Johnson, I do think that there are people that would choose Johnson over Trump. And Jill Stein, if she was the third name, Hillary would get those votes. I just don't think that she's a viable option. Although something super interesting has happened since that episode that's worth knowing about, which is that in Utah, there is a Mormon CIA operative and recovering Republican named Evan McMullen, who's in a statistical tie with Trump and Clinton, and he could win the state. And so he's only on the ballot in 11 total states. But if the election is close, all a third candidate would need is one state to push it into the House of Representatives. This candidate would just have to deny Trump and Hillary both getting 271 electors. And a Republican House with a lot of religious people in it would still have a big anti-Trump wing and might go for the Mormon guy. So, the point of that episode was just to show you that voting for third parties is not a waste of your vote. There is a path to the presidency for third parties. And now it's getting even more interesting with what's going on with Utah with Evan McMullen. So just want to put that out there. And, none of this is a prediction. I'm not bothering with predicting the future. I'm just trying to point out the possible. Anything is possible until the time has passed. But I really do apologize for making that mistake. This isn't my first mistake, and I'm sure it's not going to be my last. But Michael, thank you for sending me the email, pointing out the mistake that I made. And like I said, anyone who downloads the episode from here on forward is going to get the right version. I guess if you've already downloaded it, you can go back and listen to it again and hear what the changes were. But yeah, now that you've heard this, you're pretty much up to speed. I apologize. Thank you for putting up with me. So now that big old mea culpa's out of the way, let's get started with today's episode, which we'll get started with the continuing resolution, is what we call these, because, that's a fancy word for just postponing the decisions about funding until a later date. And so for this bill, it's HR 5325, and most of the government was just funded at the current levels until December 9th, 2016. Now, December 9th is an interesting date. It is after the election, so that means that most of the major decisions about funding for 2017 are going to be made by some people who have just been fired, and it is the most unaccountable time of any Congress, because especially this year, this is more true than most, because what passes as politics on the television in our country is this screaming fight between the reds and the blues, and it's all about Trump and Hillary. And it's honestly making a lot of us pretty sick. I think mentally, a lot of us are having trouble dealing with it. I know I am. And right when the election is over, I think there's going to be a collective switching of our heads away from politics and onto anything else after our votes are done. And this is what consistently happens in this country, which makes the lame duck so dangerous, because you have unaccountable people who are still allowed to make laws for a few months. And there is going to be must-sign legislation that funds 11 divisions of our government. So this is something we need to pay very, very close attention to. And so the next government shutdown date is December 9th. That week is going to be such a circus. And now, like I said, the government is funded in 12 different divisions. And what's interesting this year is only 11 of them were funded improperly. So I guess this is an improvement from last year where they finished 0. I'm still not giving out any gold stars for this. But in this particular law, we did get some funding done. And so we're going to take a close look at that. But before I get into that, I do want to just tell you that they did this too. Congress gave $174,000 to the family of former Representative Mark Takai. He was a representative from Hawaii, and he got sick and was killed very, very quickly by cancer during this Congress. And so what the $174,000 is, that's the minimum wage for a congressman. So they basically paid his family for one more year after he died. And I'm okay with that. I just thought I would put it out there. I thought it was interesting, and it's in this law. But yeah, so this law funds military construction, Veterans Affairs, and then related agencies. And one of the things that was in here that we've seen so many times is that money for military construction is not allowed to be used to close or realign the base at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Also, no money can be used to create space within the United States for the current prisoners at Guantanamo Bay. Now, this is worth knowing for all the people that are really, really mad at Obama. And the thing is, you have plenty of reasons to be mad at Obama. But not closing Guantanamo can't be one of the reasons, because I have seen this every single funding bill that I have read. Congress is preventing the president from closing the prison at Guantanamo Bay, and Congress is preventing the president from moving those prisoners anywhere else. So that's not on Obama, that's on Congress, and they just did it again. But the most important thing, well, maybe not the most important thing, but what this is funding is about 200 military construction projects, and we're going to spend $7.2 billion on building things around the world for the military. Now, there are military construction projects that are going to go on in just about every state in the nation. And also, we're going to be spending money to build military things in Australia, Cuba, Diego Garcia, Germany, Japan, Kwajalein, don't even know what that is, Spain, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, the United Kingdom, Wake Island, and Djibouti. And what I find interesting, not only the fact that we're just spreading our taxes all over the world to build up our military in all of those countries, but this money can't be used to pay property taxes in any of the foreign countries. So we're going to build up our military, but we refuse to contribute to the communities where we are basing our troops. I just find that kind of shitty of us, actually. Out of that $7.2 billion, $177 million of it is going to go towards NATO facilities. Now, NATO is an alliance that we are essential to. I honestly think that NATO, it's kind of our puppet from what I've been witnessing since 9/11. But NATO is an alliance that was formed after World War II by Belgium, Denmark, France, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, the UK, the US, and Canada. And one part of NATO that I think we all need to be aware of is Article 5. And what Article 5 does is it says that an attack of any member of NATO is considered an attack against them all. So if someone attacks the United States, for instance, as they did on 9/11, then all of the NATO countries are expected to contribute to the war that follows. Now, NATO is a military alliance, and during the Cold War, the big bad enemy was Russia. And so at the end of the Cold War, the NATO countries, they made a promise to Russia. All of the evidence leads to this when you see how the negotiations were done. But NATO made a promise to Russia that NATO wouldn't expand into Eastern Europe. There would be some kind of buffer between the military alliance of NATO, which was mainly Western Europe, and then Russia. And after the breakup of the Soviet Union, there would be those countries in the middle that would just be doing whatever it is they do. But the problem is that in the years that followed the creation of NATO and then our negotiations with them in the 1990s, NATO has expanded closer and closer to Russia, breaking the promise that we made. I mean, we broke it almost immediately. And so in very recent times, during the W. Bush administration, NATO expanded right up to Russia's doorstep by admitting the Baltic states, which are Estonia and Latvia, which share a border with Russia, and Lithuania, which isn't on the border, but it's pretty damn close. And so we have this military alliance, right? And Article 5 is a thing that says we're all going to band together and fight together, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger as time goes on. And we have this Article 5 thing, which was invoked for the first time after 9/11, after we were attacked. And it's being invoked again in Syria and Ukraine. Now, I've done episodes on both of these places. Episodes 67 and 68 were both on Ukraine, and episodes 41 and 108 were on Syria. I highly recommend you listen to those because I think those are 2 out of 3 fronts in the upcoming war with Russia that seems to be being planned. And you'll understand why I say that when you see what we're going to be funding. For a quick refresher, because it's been a really long time for me and for you, this is what's been going on in Ukraine and Syria. I mean, this is how I'm seeing it. I see things very differently from the mainstream media. But when it comes to Ukraine, Ukraine is a country that is in Eastern Europe. It's on the border with Russia. And Ukraine's climate is great for agriculture. So agriculture industry really wants to get in there and have the land. And then Eastern Ukraine, I think this is the bigger factor. Eastern Ukraine, which is right next door to Russia, has a giant shale formation that's full of natural gas and has yet to be fracked. So it's basically like a leprechaun's pot of gold, and the multinationals want to get in there. So in November 2013, this resource-rich country on Russia's border decided to reject a free trade agreement that they were working out with Europe, which are our allies, and instead decided to financially partner with their next-door neighbor and gas supplier, Russia. And so less than 6 months later, there was a coup, and a government was handpicked in part by our State Department and installed. And look at that. The new government then restarted the free trade agreement with Europe, ripped up the agreement with Russia, and agreed to change Ukraine's economic laws to match the demands of the multinational corporation's favorite puppet, the International Monetary Fund. And obviously, some Ukrainians were pissed about their government being replaced, and there's been a horrific civil war going on there ever since. Now, Russia, who, like I said, is the next door neighbor and the country whose trade agreement got ripped up by this coup, they decided to invade a peninsula off of Ukraine's southern coast called Crimea. Now, I think it's important to know that many people in Crimea identify as Russian. They speak Russian, and they were Russian when my grandparents were born. And it's also home to an important Russian military base, and so Russia took it back after Ukraine's government was overthrown. So now let's do a little refresher in Syria, because Syria is another place where we are making out to be all Russia's fault. Well, I'm still not entirely sure what the prize is in Syria, to be honest with you, except for its location. Syria is located right between the country we overthrew in 2003, Iraq, and our ally Turkey, which makes it an important location for fossil fuel pipelines. Syria's President Bashar al-Assad, who we had really no problem with from the time he was elected in 2001 until 2011. But Bashar al-Assad in 2011 announced a $10 billion deal for a natural gas pipeline that would take gas from Iran through Iraq and Syria to Europe, which would cut out Qatar, Turkey, basically cut out our puppet governments. And 3 weeks after this decision to make this pipeline a reality instead of a pipeline that Qatar wanted, after that decision was made, the drumbeat of Assad must go, that began and hasn't stopped since. And so our strategy for regime change in Syria is to give money and weapons to Syrians and God only knows who else to overthrow the Syrian government. Our government labels these people that we're funding, that we're giving money and weapons. Our government is labeling these people the moderate opposition or the rebels. But the plain fact is that we were not invited into Syria, and we are funding the people who are trying to overthrow the government. But Syria has a powerful friend, which is Russia. Russia was invited by the government of Syria to help defeat the rebels who are trying to overthrow Syria's government. And now you've no doubt heard lately about a place called Aleppo, about big bad Russia and murdering Assad, killing people in Aleppo. Well, I mean, it's true. They are killing people, but they're bombing the rebels. They're bombing the people we are funding who are trying to overthrow the government, the people who are being paid by us. And so that's why they are the big bad wolf. The government of Syria, with Russia's help, is fighting our regime change plan. So those are two of the fronts in what I think is the beginning of World War III with Russia. I mean, I've been watching Twitter I don't have a TV, so I really do I get my news from articles and watching what people are saying to each other on Twitter and watching little segments of the news. And everything is being blamed on Russia. Everything. Ukraine is Russia's fault. Crimea is Russia's fault. Syria is Russia's fault. The DNC leaks are Russia's fault. Please. That is so ridiculous. And plus, what matters about all of these leaks and all the stuff going to WikiLeaks is not who leaked them, but the content of the information. But the Democrats want you to think that Russia's making it all up. So we're blaming everything on Russia. And there is a third front in this physical fight that we're having with Russia that we haven't discussed yet, but I think it's time because we are paying for it and it's about to get real in 2017 based on the numbers that I saw in this law. So what I'm talking about specifically is something called the European Reassurance Initiative. They call it ERI for short. And this was announced in 2014 by Barack Obama. And the ERI is designed to increase war training activities of NATO forces in Europe. Now, for funding, the Defense Department, and you should know that this was only supposed to be a one-time thing when Obama started it in 2014. They were going to do some training exercises and then stop. But now they are not only reissuing this money, but they are just dramatically expanding it. So the Department of Defense is asking for 4 times the money for ERI for 2017 than they had for 2016. They're going from $789 million, so under $1 billion in 2016, to over $3.4 billion in 2017. This money is going to be spent in Bulgaria, Estonia, Germany, Iceland, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, and over $34 million is going to go towards worldwide unspecified. We're not even allowed to know. But the point that I want to make here when you see where this money is going is Estonia and Poland in particular are very, very close to Russia. Estonia is one of those Baltic states. And the reason that they're doing this, based on a hearing that I watched in the House Armed Services Committee in July, and this was a subcommittee on oversight and investigations. And this was a hearing that was not aired on C-SPAN, and almost no one was in attendance. So there were 8 congressmen there, and there were 7 spectators. And what I find really fascinating about the 7 spectators is that over half of them were wearing military uniforms. And so I think they were there with the witnesses. But if you look and you watch the video, on every chair, it said each chair was reserved. So even if people wanted to get in, like you and I, every chair was reserved, so we couldn't. And like I said, this wasn't on C-SPAN. It was posted on YouTube. And when I watched it, I was the 551st person in the world to have seen this. And it was a hearing on oversight of the European Reassurance Initiative. So I watched this hearing to get some insight into, what the hell we're doing with this European Reassurance Initiative. And the reason for this ERI was spelled out first by Chairman Vicky Hartzler of Missouri.
Foremost of these challenges is a resurgent Russia.
Then by Representative Jackie Speer. She was the ranking member from California. And ranking member means Vicky Hartzler is the chairman because she's a Republican, and Jackie Speer is the head Democrat on the committee.
For example, Russia has occupied Crimea and has fomented the continuing separatist struggle in eastern Ukraine. Across Europe, and in particular along Russia's border, the threat of Russian intervention is on many people's minds.
And then this was spelled out again by Major General David Alvin of the U.S. Air Force, who was one of the witnesses.
One of the key reasons for the growing instability has been Russian malign influence, coercion, and aggression against NATO allies and other partner nations. Since the illegal annexation of Crimea and the Russian activity in the Donbas region of Ukraine, the potential for Russia to further advance their military adventurism into NATO countries has demanded a strong response. We at U.S. European Command have been working to assure our allies that our commitment to Article 5 of the Atlantic Treaty is ironclad.
And so there's no doubt that this money for the European Reassurance Initiative, this $3.4 billion, is all about showing Russia how big our balls are. Now, one of the things that I think it's important to note is that this has already begun, even though I didn't find out about it until now. Here is Rachel Ellahus. She's the Principal Director for Europe and NATO Policy in the Department of Defense.
So we've seen the French carrier Charles de Gaulle deploy in the Middle East to help us with some of our stress on our naval and maritime forces. We've seen cooperative arrangements to use one another's bases. And we've seen host nations stepping up. So when we send our forces to the Baltic states, host nations such as Poland and the Balts are stepping forward to provide that infrastructure and support.
Now, you may have just heard there that she said, when we send our forces to the Baltic states, this isn't a hypothetical, this is what we're funding. So the request for this money would support an additional 5,100 active and reserve personnel in the U.S. European Command. And there was more than double the requested amount for last year for improved infrastructure. So infrastructure is going from $89 million in 2016 to $217 million in 2017. Now, the plans include a $200 million facility for pre-positioning an Army Combat Brigade, their equipment in Poland, and then also 9 Air Force projects in Germany, and this will cost $260 million. But there was a huge increase in funding for what they called enhanced pre-positioning, from $57.8 million in 2016 to $1.9 billion in 2017. That's 32 times what was appropriated last year. And we got some details about what this pre-positioning of this Army brigade would entail. What specific weapons are we going to put on Russia's border? The clip you're about to hear, this is another witness in the hearing that I watched that was not on C-SPAN. This is Tom Tyra. He's a strategist with the U.S. Army.
In the 1st Armored Brigade Combat Team, you would see 80 M1 tanks and 140 Bradley fighting vehicles, 18 artillery systems, a number of mortar systems and smaller pieces of equipment. So we would end up with that plus the support vehicles that enable that to fight. Then there would be a rotating brigade that would bring identical sets of equipment. As you delivered the fires brigade, you would expect, another 100 or so artillery systems, either tube or rocket launched, to be added to that fires brigade.
So we know we're going to have 5,100 human beings stationed there, and all of those weapons. What are these troops going to be doing with those weapons? Well, here's Representative Jackie Speer talking to Major General David Alvin.
You had indicated to me privately that the troops that we will have stationed as part of ERI would be engaged in military exercises. And you had suggested that the numbers may be as high as 100 per year, some smaller, some larger. How many of these are air shows?
Ma'am, I actually wouldn't put an air show in the
Good.
category of exercises. When we refer to these exercises, and when I say 100, some of these are small, maybe company level exercises. But these are building that understanding, that cohesion at the unit level. And I would say those are the most prolific. However, with the initial funding we've been able to receive through ERI, we're able to have exercises at the larger level, the battalion level and above, which really help us understand the interoperability between formations. Because we understand that U.S. European Command will not be the sole entity that will have to defend against Russian aggression. We will be fighting with our allies and partners in the region. And so these broader exercises, these higher level exercises really enhance that confidence to be able to fight and maneuver and do combined arms warfare beyond just the United States, but in the coalition.
So it's not going to be an air show. Dumb question. No, it's not the Blue Angels and kids aren't going to sit outside in their little chairs and clap for the pretty planes. That's not what this is. These are real military exercises that are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I just want us to stop and think for a second how we would feel if Russia was bringing that much equipment, that many weapons with that many people and stationing them in Canada. How would we react to that? And there was only one congressman whose brain even went in this direction. This is a question posed by Representative Beto O'Rourke of Texas. He was talking to Major General David Alvin.
What are the potential risks of this strategy? What could go wrong?
So you actually touched on it very well, Congressman. Is that there's an escalation risk here?
You think? Because I know that we wouldn't put up with that on our border. Why would we expect Russia to put up with it on theirs? We're playing a real dangerous game here, and I'm trying to figure out what we're getting from this. And the only reason that I can really identify for poking the bear the way we are in all of these different locations is to increase defense spending. Because after the Cold War, we stopped, apparently temporarily, blaming Russia for every bad thing that happened in our country. And we've started doing that again. And I think the reason is that when we stopped blaming big bad Russia, we didn't have a big enemy that would justify a ton of money being spent on the military in Europe, our military being stationed in Europe. So we stopped sending so many troops. And the military industrial complex, which largely exists for profit, it doesn't like that, you know? The more military buildup we need, the more money they make. And I think they want the money back. Why do I think this? Here's Major General David Alvin.
We find that within the European theater, we see a more aggressive Russia that is influencing on the periphery states of NATO. And so given the current correlation of forces that might exist in a conflict, specifically with the United States, we do not have nearly the forces we had after 25 years of the degradation of the forces in Europe. This has been understandable because there have been other national security priorities that actually have taken precedence in other parts of the world. However, we find ourselves now with a smaller number of forces from all services, as well as the appropriate equipment in order to be able to field and to respond to any other Russian aggression. And I would say that what ERI has done is it has rapidly enabled us to reverse that trend.
They want to reverse the trend of less money being spent on our military in Europe. And we've got to have an enemy to justify this level of spending. So Russia's resistance to our takeovers of Ukraine, Syria, and now NATO's creep all the way to Russia's border, their resistance is being called aggression. And that's what's being used to justify billions of our tax dollars funding military war games in Europe again. Don't believe me? Think that this is a crazy theory for what's going on here? Well, here's Rachel Ellahus, the Principal Director for Europe and NATO Policy at the Defense Department, explaining the goals of the European Reassurance Initiative.
And the three challenges that I see post-Warsaw, and as we continue to think about the future of ERI, are firstly, institutional adaptation. We need to find a way to make NATO more agile in terms of its decision-making, command structure, and defense planning. Secondly, defense investment, and that's not just monetary, but also in terms of political will. We need to encourage folks to continue to increase their defense spending and to support operations both within the European and transatlantic theater and further afield. And finally, we need to combat internal political challenges and resist those who seek to divide us or undermine the international security order.
We are creating the international security order and no one shall resist. That's what's going on here. Russia is not the aggressor here. Russia is not, taking over countries on our border. Russia's not in Mexico. Russia's not in Canada. It's us. We're the ones that are creeping up on Russia. We're the ones that took over Ukraine. We're the ones that are trying to regime change in Syria. But we're blaming it all on Russia. And now we have this massive military buildup that's going to happen on their border. What do we think is going to happen here? How far are we going to let this game go? This is a really, really dangerous game we're playing here. And one of the things that makes me so angry is that this is not being discussed. If I hadn't read this law, I wouldn't know that this is happening, even though Congress knows that it's happening. The information's out there. And here we have these debates, these horrific debates that are happening where this is not being discussed with the two possible commanders in chief. This should absolutely be on every single debate. We should be talking about whether or not this is a good idea, not about rape culture and all of this cultural crap. What we need to be discussing is where are we going to war next? And are we risking World War III with Russia, which is nuclear arms? You know, like it's so frustrating to look into these bills and find stuff like this and then watch what's going on the TV and see how different these two universes are. The one I'm living in, the one that I'm reading about, and then the one that's on the television. We are being so horribly misinformed. And I also want to point out that by having military construction and veterans be a completely different section of government funding than the Defense Department, it does make it look like we're funding our defense, our war, less than we are. Because when you see that giant government funding law that we know is coming on December 9th or maybe the week after, sometime right between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we know it's coming. One of the things that this does by putting military construction and veterans in this law and not that one is it is going to separate this money out so that lazy journalists who look at the Defense Department funding are not going to see this giant chunk of money that's going towards military construction all over the world. It does divert attention in this way. So I'm really upset about everything that I'm seeing here. And I think we're in a lot of trouble if we don't start talking about what's actually going on in the world, such as building up our military on Russia's border. It is such a dangerous game. But hopping off my soapbox and back into the bill, this law also funded the Department of Veterans Affairs. And so big picture, this law provides over $103 billion for veterans benefits in the next year. It also provides approximately $56 billion for the Veterans Administration and veterans medical expenses. And then on top of that, provides approximately $7.2 billion in additional funding for private health care for veterans. And I will have to do an episode on this at some point. But there is a slow motion privatization of the VA going on. They call it choice, just like they do with schools, but they call it Veterans Choice. And it is a way to get veterans to go to private clinics instead of the VA. And the funding for this is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I will have to do a whole episode on it to show you exactly what I'm talking about. But that is happening and it is funded. And so let's add this up really quick. When you add $103 billion plus $56 billion plus $7.2 billion, you get $166.2 billion for veterans, which is also not counted as war funding. And I think it should be, because we always talk about our defense budget and how big it is. It's over $500 billion every single year, but there's an extra $166.2 billion every year that we're spending on veterans, which is a cost of war. When you send human beings over to these wars and they come back injured, we have to pay for their health care forever. And so this is a big expense that could be minimized by having less wars and having less veterans. We need to start counting this as a war expense too. But getting off this pesky soapbox again, I'm kind of comfortable up on this soapbox today. But back into the bill, in addition to funding all of our veterans' expenses, this bill also, or law I should say, adds whistleblower protections and procedures for people within the Veterans Administration. And I don't know. I find the procedure to be kind of not great. And the reason is that it's all done with paperwork. So if there's a whistleblower, the person is supposed to submit paperwork to their supervisor. And the supervisor is then going to forward it to a central whistleblower office, which is going to handle all whistleblower complaints. And this whistleblower office is going to have a hotline for anonymous complaints. But to file an official complaint about something that's going on in the department, the whistleblower has to put their name and contact information along with their complaint on paper. They have to know for sure that their supervisor isn't a part of it, although it does say that if the person suspects that the supervisor is a part of whatever the problem is, the whistleblower can go above that person. But the official chain is that whistleblower has to put all of their information on paper. And then if the supervisor finds their complaints to be legit, then the whistleblower will be informed of transfer opportunities. But by taking all of this paperwork, making it all on paper, and then putting it in a central whistleblower office, I just feel like it's going to expose the name of the person making the complaints quite easily. And I don't know. Knowing how positions of power work, especially in something like a military hierarchy, I don't know. I worry very much about retaliation. And they did do something about the retaliation thing in here. It says that supervisors can be suspended or removed for failing to act on a whistleblower complaint. They can also be suspended or removed from office for restricting an employee's ability to file their complaint or for conducting a negative peer review or retaliating against a whistleblower in any way. But I just find so much of this to be more subtle than that. So I do worry about retaliation in this. I mean, I think it's nice that they did set up a process for whistleblowing, but it puts way too much risk on a whistleblower. I mean, if I was in the Veterans Administration and I saw something, I would have a real tough time putting my name and contact information along with the complaint and then handing it to someone in a position of power and just trusting that they're going to do the right thing with it. So even though there are punishments for supervisors that don't do what they're supposed to do, I'm not feeling like these protections are good enough, but at least the attempt was there. I guess we can give them credit for that. We have to give these people credit for the dumbest of things because there's so little credit to go around, but at least they did try to put in whistleblower protections. I just don't see them as being adequate enough. And then before I move on out of the Veterans Administration, I do want to touch on something that has been coming up over and over again in Congressional Dish during the last, I think, like 2 years or so, which is the hepatitis C drug Sovaldi. Now, we have an issue in the Veterans Administration because we have a lot of veterans who are getting hepatitis C. And Sovaldi is a miracle drug that cures about 90% of the cases. But just like with the EpiPens, the manufacturer, which in this case is Gilead Sciences, they are price gouging. And so they no longer have any competition for this miracle drug. And although competition is coming onto the market, so it's getting a little bit better, but for all intents and purposes, they're price gouging because they have very little competition. They're selling Sovaldi for $1,000 per pill. And what makes me so angry about this is the same pill sells for $4 in India. And one of the reasons that it's that much cheaper is there are 11 Indian companies that are allowed to make generics, but our patent protections here are so ridiculous that Gilead Sciences has been able to really stop competition for theirs. And so what we are doing as taxpayers is we are buying Sovaldi to cure our veterans of hepatitis C. I have no issue with that. What I have an issue with is that we are paying $1.5 billion in the next year through the Veterans Administration for this drug. Now, the VA pays about $600 per pill. That's their discount. So instead of paying the full $1,000, they get the great price of $600 per pill. So that's 2.5 million doses that we buy with our $1.5 billion. If we were charged like India is charged, this could cost us $10 million. So because of the price gouging in tax money for what could cost us $10 million, we're paying $1.5 billion. This is what I'm talking about when I say we are taxed enough, but our money is being diverted in stupid ways into private pockets. In this case, Gilead Sciences. And I think it's worth knowing that for this election cycle, which is only 2 years, Gilead Sciences has given over $233,000 directly to candidates in Congress, and they've spent over $4.68 million lobbying Congress, and 16 members of Congress own Gilead Sciences stock. So that is how this is allowed to continue, because everyone's getting paid with this money that's getting funneled. You know, Gilead Sciences, their profits allow them to donate money to candidates, to spend money on lobbying. Their stock goes up, which makes the congressman money. And so it's our tax money being diverted into the campaigns right back to congressmen. It's such a dirty little circle jerk. And our money is being spent in this way again, and nothing is being done about the drugs. Now, there is some hope that something can be done about the price gouging. And in the thank you section, stick around for that one. It's going to be a long one this time, but stick around for that because I have some really good news when it comes to pharmaceutical price gouging. I got some information that gives me a ton of hope that in the next year, we can actually get Congress to do something about it in a way that favors us. I know that the corporations are spooked. And so I'll read you something in the thank you section about that. But just know that we're getting price gouged again for the hepatitis C drugs, that nothing has been done, even though we've known about this for at least a year, if not longer. And let's see, moving on, the last thing that this temporary government funding law did was give some money to Zika response and preparedness. And just for posterity's sake, because I think now that they have the money, we're probably not going to hear about Zika anymore. Zika it's something that we have been fear-mongered about now for about a year. It's all about mosquitoes. People can get Zika through getting bitten by a mosquito. And then if they get pregnant, their babies can get microcephaly, which leads to tiny heads and other problems. So it's basically birth defects. is the issue with Zika. But I looked into Zika as a disease. A lot of people who have it never even know it. It feels like a mild fever and then you're fine. So as far as Zika being dangerous, it's kind of dangerous for pregnant women, although I can't name any names here, but we did know someone in my circle of acquaintances here who did have Zika, who was pregnant, and her baby is fine. So it's definitely not something that's like guaranteed to make your kid sick, but really it's a problem for pregnant women. So this has been all over the news, and the Obama administration said they wanted $1.9 billion to fight Zika. They didn't get the full pot of money they were asking for. They got $1.1 billion. And so I wanted to look quite closely into where this money is going. And as usual, I have concerns. So the biggest pot of money is worth $394 million. And this is going to be put in the Public Health and Social Services Emergency Fund. And just keep in mind, anytime you see emergency anywhere, it means that normal rules don't apply. So that's my first concern. What this says that the money is for is to, quote, prevent, prepare for, and respond to Zika virus, health conditions related to such virus, and other vector-borne diseases domestically and internationally, unquote. Two concerns there. One is, this isn't just for Zika. The word other is in there. Other vector-borne diseases. I think that means like bug diseases, but I'm not entirely sure what vector-borne means, but other diseases, not just Zika. And it's domestically and internationally, so this money can go around the world. Also, we can use this money for stockpiles of products purchased, products I'm guessing like pharmaceuticals. Also, this money can be used for construction, alteration, or renovation of, quote, non-federally owned facilities, unquote, at state and local laboratories. I just found that kind of interesting. I don't know. That might just be for state and local, so it could be just for like the smaller government facilities, or non-federally owned could open the door to private companies, private labs getting the money. That's unclear to me, but that is a possibility. One of the stranger ones in here says that $394 million can be used for the purchase of and insurance for motor vehicles in foreign countries.
Every single one of you desperately needs a brand new car! You get a car! You get a car! You get a car! You get a car! Everybody gets a car!
So I have no idea what's going on there. And then one last thing with this $394 million, this is from the explanatory statement. It says, quote, within the funds provided for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, a robust level of funding is intended to support mosquito control efforts conducted by state, county, or municipal programs, including mosquito control districts, unquote. And this, I think, is at the heart of this. I think that there are companies that are going to profit from the spraying that's going to go on. And one of the things that concerns me is that when you look at the Centers for Disease Control website, because I went there to be like, okay, well, what is the company that makes the insecticide? You know, I'm thinking like, is it Monsanto? Is it Dow Chemical? Like, who's going to benefit from this? And the CDC says that it's state and local officials that make the decision on what insecticides they use for aerial spraying. So we don't even get to know what's getting sprayed on us with this giant pot of money. So just be aware of that. There is some kind of like mosquito spraying that's going on. And the thing is, it doesn't even have to happen all over the country. This is what's concerning too. Zika is not a threat to the entire country. Right now, like Puerto Rico is having a problem with it, Florida, basically like the Southeast United States. But this money doesn't need to go nationally for mosquito spraying, and yet it's going to. So I'm finding the whole thing kind of weird. There's also another almost as big pot of money. This is $387 million, which is also going to be able to be used for other vector-borne diseases than Zika domestically and internationally. It can be used to purchase vaccines, which don't exist for Zika. And I would never put a vaccine in my arm for Zika, just putting that out there. I would wear mosquito repellent. I would not be getting a vaccine. So I don't know who these vaccines were for. There's also, this money is going to go for healthcare for mothers and children, so at least that makes sense. It also goes to reimburse states for healthcare costs related to Zika that aren't covered by private insurance, okie dokie, and then also for projects in Puerto Rico and other territories related to mothers and children's health. So that one is actually not too bad. That one seems to be 100% for Zika, measures that will make a difference. There's also $152 million just for Zika research and vaccine development. So that's going straight to the pharmaceuticals. And then there's $145 million for global health programs. And this is where my spidey sense gets really crazy. This $145 million is going to go towards mosquito control. So we're going to be spraying all over the world. It's also going to go to vaccines that don't exist. And we got to pay companies to make those exist. This money can also be donated to the World Health Organization, the United Nations Children's Fund, the Pan American Health Organization, and the International Atomic Energy Agency, what the hell, and the Food and Agriculture Organization. So what they're doing with the money, I have no idea. And yeah, so that's the one where I feel like there's $145 million that's just going to be dispersed to connected people to do God only knows what with. It's not guaranteed to do anything for Zika specifically. Then there's $15 million that just goes to the State Department and $10 million that goes to USAID. And one thing that's kind of interesting about these two pots of money for the State Department and USAID is that they're going to be allowed to hire people to perform, quote, critical work relating to Zika response, unquote. That's as specific as it gets, so that's super broad. And these hires are going to be exempt from some federal laws. So weird stuff going on with the Zika money. I'm guessing maybe that $387 million that actually mentions healthcare for pregnant people, that's probably going towards Zika. The rest of it, I honestly do not know. Oh, especially, this is the most important part. The end of it says that this money can be transferred to and merged with other accounts as long as Congress is informed. So these agencies, they don't have to ask Congress's permission. They just have to tell them. Then the money can just be moved around. So really, these little pots of money and where it's supposed to go are just suggestions. So I think a lot of this is a big old scam, to be honest with you. I think that every single year there's a new disease that's going to kill us all. And then a year later, we forget that it was ever a thing. Because remember, Ebola was the big one last year and none of us have Ebola. And Zika's the big one this year and very few of us have Zika. And in fact, most states in this union can't even get Zika because the kind of mosquito that carries Zika doesn't live there. So Zika is just, it's all kinds of shady. And now that I see where the money is going to, I just don't trust it at all. So there you go. So let's move on to the second law that we're going to talk about today, and that's S-2040, the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act, JASTA. And a lot of people asked me to read this, and so that's why I'm doing it. This one was passed kind of as like a 15th anniversary special for 9/11. We recently got a declassification of the infamous 28 pages, which are from a congressional investigation that happened into 9/11. But these 28 pages have been classified until now. And people had long been speculating that it would basically say that Saudi Arabia had a hand in 9/11. And so these were released, and I did read them, and I'll give you some details in a minute. But what the media was basically telling us is that this new law, this was quite the fight in Congress. The way this went down is that it passed overwhelmingly by both the House and the Senate, and President Obama vetoed it, and then the House and Senate overrode his veto, and that's how this became law. So it was very dramatic how this all went down, but it did become law 100% because of Congress. And the way that the media covered this is they made it all about Saudi Arabia, saying that this is going to allow the 9/11 victims to sue Saudi Arabia. And so the most shocking thing to me when I actually read this law is, first of all, it was only 4 pages. Anyone could have read it. And it actually wasn't hard to read. It wasn't one of those where I had to bounce back and forth and like figure out how it changed current laws. Like it just added to a current law. So it was a super easy bill to read. And Saudi Arabia wasn't named in it. Instead, this applies to all foreign nations. What it basically does is take away the immunity that foreign states generally get in United States courts for the civil cases, the ones that seek money for injuries, damage to property, or deaths. that occur in the United States and are caused by an act of international terrorism within the United States. And the biggest change of how this works is that it's regardless of where the act on the side of the foreign nation occurred. So say, for instance, that someone funded 9/11, from what I understand, had someone before this law given money in, say, like Paris. So if the hijackers met with an agent of a foreign government in Paris and they exchanged money there, then people in the United States couldn't sue that government. However, had they met in New York and exchanged that money, well, then we would be allowed to sue them. So basically what this says is that you're not immune, if you're a foreign nation, from civil cases within the United States, even if you gave the money to someone outside of the United States. If you gave the money in Paris, if you gave the money in your home country, you can still be sued by us. However, a foreign state cannot be sued for negligence. So that's the biggest change here, is it takes away some immunity that foreign states have had. And what I just found so fascinating about that is it wasn't just Saudi Arabia, it's all of them. So this is actually much bigger than what we were told. Now, that said, even though people in the United States will be able to sue other countries that are responsible directly for terrorist acts within the United States, there are a lot of ways that the rich and the powerful can stop our civil cases. Specifically, the Attorney General and the State Department can put a squash on any of these cases. So specifically, the Attorney General can intervene and stop or delay these suits against foreign countries. And they can do this by granting unlimited stays of 6 months, of 180-day periods. So they can delay it indefinitely. The Attorney General can. Also, a court can delay the proceeding against a foreign state for 6 months if the State Department, quote, certifies that the United States is engaged in good faith discussions with the foreign state defendant, unquote, in an attempt to find a resolution. And then the court has to, they don't have an option, they have to grant an extension if the State Department basically says that they're still engaged in these good faith discussions. And there's no limit on that either. So both the State Department and the Justice Department have the ability to stop these cases for all practical purposes forever if they want to. And this does say that this law is applicable to injuries caused to a person, property, or business. It's not just about the 9/11 victims who lost family members. It's also businesses who were harmed on or after September 11th, 2001. So yes, this does apply to September 11th, but it also applies to anything that has happened after, and businesses are included in this too. So actually, this law is much more broad than we were told. It applies to all foreign nations, not just Saudi Arabia, and it applies to all terror attacks on or since September 11th, not just September 11th. That said, though, most people consider this the September 11th bill, and I am a curious person, so how about we look at those 28 pages just for fun, even though this really wasn't about Saudi Arabia? Let's make it about Saudi Arabia, because I wanted to read the 28 pages, so I'll tell you what I found. First thing I found is that the 28 pages is actually 34 pages. So that I found kind of funny. And like I said before, the 28 pages, this came from a congressional investigation into 9/11. And then this was used by the 9/11 Commission in that giant book that they published. And so the investigation that these pages came from was finished by the end of 2002. It was really a preliminary thing. And really the conclusions that it came to can be boiled down to this. It says, quote, while in the United States, some of the September 11 hijackers were in contact with and received support or assistance from individuals who may be connected to the Saudi government, unquote. And then another quote says, both the FBI and the CIA recognize the possibility that individuals connected to the Saudi government may be providing support to terrorists, unquote. Both of those statements are inconclusive and could easily be used by lawyers to say, well, these are inconclusive. It says may be connected. It doesn't say that they for sure are. When you read the whole 28 pages or 34 pages, the most damning evidence that was there was about one particular guy. His name was Omar al-Bayami, and here's basically his deal. Before moving to the United States, he had 3 different relationships with the Saudi government. First, he was an accountant at the Saudi Civil Aviation Administration. He was given cash by the Saudi Ministry of Finance, and his education in the United States was paid for by the government of Saudi Arabia. Also, while he was living in San Diego, he was being paid by a contractor for the Saudi Defense Ministry. Now, his relationship to the hijackers is that he met two of them in San Diego, hosted them in his home, and helped them find an apartment. When they found an apartment, he co-signed their lease. Then when they moved into their own place, he threw them a party and then introduced them to a translator who helped the hijackers get driver's licenses and find a flight school. Also, this is probably the creepiest part. He left the United States and stopped getting paid by the Saudi defense contractor in August 2001, 1 month before 9/11. So that stinks to all hell. And then the only other thing that really was a conclusion is that the Saudis didn't fully cooperate in the 9/11 investigation. The rest of it was all really speculative. There was a lot of we don't knows, and there was also a lot of huge black lines. My favorite instance of this, it goes, quote, "The FBI and CIA have established a working group to look into the Saudi issue. The FBI formed a squad at the Washington field office to investigate this issue," and blank for the rest of the page. Like, we weren't allowed to see any of it. So if there were conclusions in there, who knows? But as far as like conclusions are concerned, another thing that I was struck by reading these pages was how little work Congress was willing to do on investigating 9/11. Here's a quote from the pages. While the joint inquiry, and that's the congressional investigation, while the joint inquiry uncovered this material during the course of its review of FBI and CIA documents, it did not attempt to investigate and assess the accuracy and significance of this information independently, recognizing that such a task would be beyond the scope of this joint inquiry, unquote. And so instead of continuing to investigate, they just asked the FBI and CIA to keep reviewing it and washed their hands of it. Here's another quote. It says, "It was not the task of this joint inquiry to conduct the kind of extensive investigation that would be required to determine the true significance of any such alleged connections to the Saudi government," unquote. So, I mean, any lawyer worth a hill of beans can use this to get the Saudi government out of any trouble unless there's other evidence that's come to light, but they're not going to be able to do it with these 28 pages. And our Congress really just let 9/11 go, which is another thing that's really disturbing. We don't really know what happened on 9/11. I don't think that the 9/11 Commission report gave us the full story. And yes, I am one of those people that just doesn't think that Building 7 demolition looks right. I'm not saying like, that's the thing. I don't know what I'm saying. I don't really know what happened, but I do know that our Congress let the FBI and the CIA do investigating, and they just stopped after this. They were done by the end of 2002. And I don't like that, how they just said, well, it was too hard, so we didn't do an extensive investigation. I'm not pleased with that at all. And so that's probably my biggest conclusion that I could draw from this, is that Congress sucks, which is kind of the conclusion of Congressional Dish in general. And that's it for this week's bills. So as I record this, we're about a month out from our election. And if you were to turn on the news in these here United States, you would assume that the only thing on our ballot are the presidential candidates, because that's the only thing that gets covered. But that is not true. The presidential portion is only one small portion of the people you're going to be able to vote for on your ballot. And it's not just people. On your ballot, you can find your congressmen, your state reps, your local representatives. You're also going to find ballot initiatives. I think we have, 17 here in California. So there's a lot of things that we get to vote on. And then there's also going to be judges that you can vote for. And I still don't know how to research judges. But one of the keys to voting is to know ahead of time what's going to be on your ballot. And so the first step to being prepared for an election is finding your ballot. The first place that you can look is your own mailbox. And I don't vote by mail. I was signed up to vote by mail, but my ballot actually never showed up, which is why I had to vote provisional in the primary. So I've switched it with the Secretary of State. I'm forevermore going to walk in and vote on my paper ballot. But even if you're not voting by mail, you should be getting an informational packet that tells you what to expect on your ballot, at least in some states. Now, our voting procedures are determined state by state, so these vary wildly, which is why I have to be so broad about this. But the first place I would check for information is my mailbox. The second place that I would check, and first for a lot of people, is your state's Secretary of State's website, because all elections are administered by the Secretary of State in your state. And so if you go to their website, usually there will be an election section and you should be able to find information on your ballot there. If it's too tough to navigate these websites, because I can tell you from that episode that I did about how to be on the ballot in all 50 states as an independent, I had to look through a lot of Secretary of State's websites. Some are great, some are absolutely terrible. Like, they're so hard to navigate. And so if that's your case, then just look up the phone number for your Secretary of State, and someone there should be able to send you your ballot or tell you exactly how to find it. But definitely use your Secretary of State's resources to find your information. So once you have your ballot, what do you do with it? Well, you need to research the people on it. So for Congress, there's a few things that I always do to research my congressman. First thing is I look at their voting record, and my favorite site for looking up this type of stuff is govtrack.us. But now that you know that Congressional Dish is a thing, I mean, it's tough to look at someone's voting record if you don't know what the bills are to judge them by. So what you can do is also go to congressionaldish.com and just pick whatever bills were the most important ones to you. On congressionaldish.com, in the show notes section, I've linked to all of those bills, so you can just go and check out their voting record on the bills that you heard talked about on Congressional Dish by using my website. So I do suggest you use that. But you can also look at voting records and stuff like that by going directly to govtrack.us. I would also go to opensecrets.org once you know the name of your congressmen and senators. Opensecrets.org is how I find out about the campaign finance information. And so if you go there and type in your person's name, you can see which industries are funding their campaigns, not only for this election, but for their entire careers. So really go and play around in opensecrets.org. It's one of my favorite websites in the universe, and it's going to really help you know who's funding your candidates. And then also to judge the job performance of your incumbents, if you are considering rehiring them, I would also go to C-SPAN and search for your congressmen and senators' names, because you can learn a lot about a person by the things that they're saying on the House and Senate floor. And then I also, at this point, want to ask for your help, because on election night, I've decided to do a live event, probably using Facebook Live. I'm not completely sure yet. I'll have all this information for you in the next episode. But one of the things that I want to do is focus on the congressional races. And I think it would be really fun, as you're researching your own candidates, for you to send me clips that you think really represent who your congressman is, so that the rest of us can get to know them, whether they just got hired or fired. Here's an example of the type of clip that I'm looking for. The following clip is from Representative Jeff Sessions. He's the chairman of the Rules Committee. He's from Texas. And I just feel like these clips, when I think of him, these really help me understand who this man is.
They don't understand the business. They don't understand how they operate. And they sure as heck don't understand why it's important to have a free enterprise system, one which is nimble and prepared and ready for competition. I spent 16 years without missing a day of work in the private sector prior to coming to Congress.
So first of all, it just occurred to me that is Pete Sessions, not Jeff Sessions. I always get these two confused, because Jeff Sessions is the senator from Alabama who looks like the doctor who, spoiler alert, was the murderer in the movie The Burbs. This guy is not him. This is Pete Sessions, who's a House of Representatives member from Texas and is also the chairman of the House Rules Committee. He's very, very powerful, because he determines, what bill gets to go to the floor and which one doesn't, as the chairman of the House Rules Committee. And I clipped this actually in 2011. This is one of the first things I've ever clipped in my life, but it stuck with me all these years every time I see him, because it just explained to me why he's so into making laws that make business as much money as possible, no matter what that bill's effect on the environment or workers or anything else. And it's because this guy didn't take a day off of work in 16 years. He's that guy that you work with that, like, if you're having a good time, you have to be quiet because the brown noser just walked in. He's the company man. And so when he goes to Congress, he identifies with his company still. He's still the company man. And now he's making laws in company's favor. And so that just makes perfect sense to me. And I've never forgotten that clip. And so that's the type of stuff that I'm looking for, like, just to figure out who is this person and who do they identify with? Is it businesses or people or environment or whatever? Here's another good clip that I like about him that really explained why he does the things he does.
This crowd that really doesn't like free enterprise and what I believe is the heartland of this country, manufacturing, which has really taken off as a result of effective use of resources, natural resources, in this country through natural gas and the availability of nuclear power and the availability of oil, which fuels our cars to where we can use the resources that were given us effectively.
So what I like about this clip is it shows that his resistance to clean energy and getting off of fossil fuels, it has a lot to do with his belief in free enterprise systems and the free market and letting the market determine what the rules should be. I mean, all of that is intertwined in the way that he legislates. So that's the type of stuff I'm looking for. I'm looking for things that they say that give us a clue as to how they're going to legislate and what kind of laws they'll be pushing for. And so how are we going to do this project? Well, I kind of need some suggestions because one of the things that I am considering is opening up a Dropbox. So if you do have clips for me, I can just, you can email me and I can invite you to the Dropbox. But one thing I'm really concerned about is people sending viruses through my Dropbox. I do have to be careful about stuff like that. And so if there is some kind of online directory that we could set up and all use together, I think that would be great. I just don't know what's out there and what isn't. And honestly, I don't have the time to create a folder for every district in the country. So I don't really know what filing system we're going to do yet. And so if someone wants to set something up, that would be great. I will have information for you how we're going to actually pull that off in the next episode. So for now, just collect your clips. And as for the how to collect clips, one of the easiest ways to do it if you have a Mac is to just use GarageBand. I've been using that since the beginning and I am a technological dinosaur. So that's super easy. And if you have a Windows computer, I don't really know. I know that there is a free software for podcasters that you can download. It's called Audacity. But I don't know. Any way that you know how to make an MP3 works for me. I don't really care how you do it. And then as for how you get the videos themselves onto your computer, C-SPAN is an amazing resource for this. So if you are trying to get something that happened within the halls of Congress, so from the House or Senate floors or from any of the hearings that were aired on C-SPAN, if you scroll down the page where the video is, you'll see a little box that says purchase a DVD or download. When you open that, you'll see the MP4 videos, low quality ones, are free to download. So that's how I'm doing this. I'm not paying for much of this anymore. And so you just download it and then use your clipping software to grab whatever clips that you want. It's super, super easy. And then also, just so you know, when it comes to C-SPAN, if you look on the right-hand side in the hearings or the House floor clips or whatever, you'll see a whole list of people. You can also search the transcripts and filter by speaker. So if you're looking for a specific person, it will actually jump to your person. So C-SPAN does so much of the work for you for finding your congressman, the people that you're trying to research. And C-SPAN's an amazing resource and you really should be using it for this. So that's the clip collection project, but that's only for Congress. And so you also are going to have to research your state reps and your local representatives. And a good resource, at least for the states, is billtrack50.com. That's billtrack, the two words, and then 50.com. And you will have to sign up for a free account. But like I said, it's free. And this is something that you can use to look at the bills that have passed your state houses and then see how your people have been voting on those bills. That's an option. You can also just Google these people because Google's it's a verb for a reason. So I use Google to find videos of my state and local representatives, see if there have been any town halls that I didn't know about, see if they have done any speeches. You could also use, the normal Google searches to see if there was any information in your local press or if there have been op-eds or letters to the editor. So just Google these people and find out what you can and see how their views and their actions match what you would like them to do in your state. And then as for propositions, I always read the packets that they send to me in the mail, but I also keep in mind that to get into those packets, the people whose words end up in those are connected in some way. And so I also know that a lot of that is industry written. So I do take to the internet and I research the propositions too. I like to know the money behind the propositions. Who's funding what side? It really tells me a lot more than the carefully worded explanations that are in the packet. So I do recommend doing both for any propositions on your ballot. Here in California, we have 17 this year. So it's going to be an intense research weekend for me before the election. And then last, there's going to be judges and stuff. And honestly, I don't know what the hell to do about the judges because I've shown up to vote before and didn't even know who was on my ballot. So state by state, I'm still in this situation where I'm not entirely sure what's going to be on my ballot. And I really don't have any advice for you on that. But those are kind of the things that I do to research my votes. I've gotten a lot of people asking. And so there you go. That is my plan. And if you would like to help me with the election episode, while you're researching your congressman, please reach out to me and we'll find some kind of way to do this clip collection project. Oh, and this is something that's really important. I want them short. So don't be sending me stuff that's 5 minutes. I won't even listen to it. Aim for 30 seconds or less. If it's a really good clip, you can go up to a minute, but really anything more than a minute, I'm not going to listen to. So thank you very much in advance. And I hope this works out because that could make for a really fun election night as the House and Senate returns come in. Okay, so now is the part of the podcast where I tell you how it makes money, which is that it's listener supported. That's why you haven't heard a single advertisement ever on this podcast because, really the number one reason is that I hate advertising and I just want to have an advertising free space in this world. But also it's advertising and the corruption of money that is causing our media to collude with candidates and the Democratic and Republican parties and, give them the stories that they're looking for. And then those same candidates go and buy ads on those same networks, which funds the paychecks of the people on the networks. It's this whole big circle jerk. And I don't want to be involved. And so this podcast is listener supported, and there's a couple different ways you can support it. We've had PayPal, which you can do either monthly subscriptions or one-time contributions. You can use Bitcoin. A lot of people still use Bitcoin. You can send physical checks to the P.O. box, which I really like because PayPal, when you use it, takes a 3% cut, where physical checks, no one takes a cut. And if anything, if you're doing it through your online banking, your bank has to pay for the envelope, the check, and the stamp. So you kind of stick it to your big bank a little bit. Everyone seems to like that angle of it. And then when I was in Los Angeles a couple weeks ago, I did have a lovely happy hour with a new friend who's in podcasting and who is having a tough time monetizing her podcast, doing the same thing. She doesn't want to take advertisements. And one of the pieces of advice that I gave her was, if you want people to give you money, make it as easy as possible for them. So it's like you might like one particular platform, but they might like something else. And so I decided to take my own advice. And so now Congressional Dish does have a Patreon page. And here's the thing about Patreon, though. I didn't want to set up another thing that did the same exact thing as PayPal. And Patreon is more expensive. Patreon takes a 5% cut. But where Patreon is different is that it allows you to contribute per episode as opposed to per month. So if you're signing up with PayPal, you're contributing whatever you think is fair per month. If you're signing up with Patreon, you get to contribute whatever you think is fair per episode, which does mean that you can expect to pay for 2 episodes a month. But maybe if I do a bonus episode like I did with the EpiPen hearing, you might pay a little bit more. But it is an option for people that like that idea as opposed to the per month thing. So that's how I set it up. Patreon is a per episode deal. And I'm happy to tell you that before I even made this announcement, we have 3 patrons already. So that's exciting. The first one is Brandon Schultz. Now, Brandon is the host of the Seahawkers podcast. And in the last episode, I told you that he signed up for a $3 a month PayPal subscription. And the $3 a month amount was in the honor of the Seahawks quarterback Russell Wilson, because that is the number on his jersey. And Brandon, I just wanted to tell you that Joe, my Seahawks fan husband, wanted me to let you know that number 3, Russell Wilson, is not his favorite player. His favorite player is Garrison Smith, number 98. So, but yes, thank you for signing up for that subscription. But then he also sent me an email about Patreon, and he pushed me over the edge. I did sign up for Patreon, and then he became the first patron at $5 an episode. And he also left a note. He said, "Great show this week. My wife's mom is a school teacher, and a really good friend from college is a teacher as well. They've been thinking about the importance to vote for particular candidates in our state, and it was good to hear a lot of the background for the law that's now driving a lot of the conversation around the election this year and its impact on the schools. Thanks for the shout out as well. You'll be seeing a one-time donation from me for $12, which did come in. Of course, that's an important number for Seattle fans, but if you want to accept it in honor of your quarterback returning from suspension this week, I suppose that's fine too." Thank you very much, Brandon. And Tom Brady did come back and he whooped some serious ass. I believe it was 3 touchdowns and like 300 or 400 yards. I can't remember, but it was in the hundreds. So welcome back, Tom Brady. But yeah, thank you so much for all of your contributions. And I really appreciate that. And then we also have a second Patreon patron. So that's Davey McNaughton. Davey has been contributing through PayPal for a while, but has never been happy about it. And so he asked for the Patreon. I gave him the link and he is now contributing $6 per episode. So thank you, Davey. And then we have a third patron who is Sam Appleton, who's contributing $5 an episode. And what's funny about Sam is that he found the link all on his own and then emailed me to ask me if it was real, which yes, it very much is. I mean, it's a very bare bones page. I don't have a video up there and I don't have any extra gifts. It's just the same deal as everyone from PayPal and paper checks get. You're basically getting the podcast because honestly, time has been, I'll explain why in a bit, but like my time is a little out of control. I'm definitely burning out because I'm doing a lot more of the work by myself again. And so I don't have time to make stickers and send t-shirts and like do the stuff that Patreon encourages you to do. I don't have that. So it's a very bare bones Patreon page. And if more people are into it, maybe I'll put some time into it. But yeah, Sam was just looking around on Patreon and found it. So thanks for signing up. And he also sent a message. He said, I think the media's myopia on presidential politics is one of the biggest contributing factors to why our republic is collapsing. So you're filling a huge and vital gap in the current media landscape. And I appreciate your logic on why you won't accept sponsors. So supporting you in even this small way is worth it if it helps you keep doing what you're doing. I'm optimistic that there's a way bigger set of people out there who will see the benefits of your show and eventually raise the level of support you get, like the set of people who are slowly realizing our republic is broken and might be wondering why that is. Sam, I thank you for supporting this and for supporting the funding model because, John C. Dvorak and Adam Curry are really the masters of this. They invented it. It's called the value for value model, but I really do think it's the most fair way of doing this, which is that you get to determine how much this podcast is worth to you. And I just hope that number is more than zero. And so people are contributing whatever they think is fair. I have people that contribute $1 a month and I have people that contribute $250 a month. So it's really like, it's whatever it's worth it to you. And then there's also people that just send in one-time contributions whenever they want to in whatever amounts they want. So I'm also having a lot of fun seeing why you guys pick the numbers that you pick. But yeah, I love the value for value model and I would love to inspire other people to have the courage to do it this way because it is very inconsistent and it's an emotional roller coaster. But it also is so satisfying to not have to tell you anything because someone is paying me to do so. So thank you for supporting that. And I'm really happy this week to let you guys know that not only do we have 3 Patreon supporters before I even told you that the Patreon support page is a thing, but we've had a very nice rebound from the exodus of people who got mad at me for saying I was going to vote for Gary Johnson. And I just want to put it out there that that episode was not about Gary Johnson. The whole point of that episode was supposed to be a lesson in the Electoral College and showing that the way that it works, it does allow for someone other than the Democratic and Republican nominees to become the president. And this year I looked at the possibilities and I thought, well, Gary Johnson seems like the most likely one. It wasn't about my vote and it wasn't about Gary Johnson. It was about the Electoral College. To be completely honest with you, I'm not even sure I'm going to vote for Gary Johnson because I live in California, which is almost guaranteed to go to Hillary Clinton. And so I might just vote my conscience on this. And if I do, I'm not voting for Gary Johnson because I disagree with him on so many of the things that you guys pointed out. I don't like that he is free market everything. I don't think that a society run based on the profits of business is a good way to run things because businesses, I just think greed is not the best thing to operate a society on. So free market is not my thing. Freedom for businesses is not my thing. I like freedom for people. And Gary Johnson is all about the free market stuff and he is dopey and there's a lot of bad things about him. My favorite candidate right now is Jill Stein, but I'm not researching my ballot until the weekend before the election. So I honestly don't know how I'm going to vote. But that episode, I guess I was too loose by saying that I was going to vote for this specific person. I was just trying to do an episode on the Electoral College. And I honestly think that the message is still good because if you didn't want Trump and Hillary, there is a strategy there that can be used. I still like that episode, but there was this huge backlash and a bunch of people canceled and it really upset me. And I'm happy to tell you that in the past 2 weeks, we've had enough people start subscriptions to now Congressional Dish is $20 per month over where it was before the exodus. So I'm really happy to be back not only to where we were before, but a little bit better. I always want to see it go up bit by bit. And that happened. So thank you to all the people that signed up. This is going to be a very long thank you section. Yay. So let's get started first with some subscribers that are sending in paper checks, but gave the podcast a raise. Now, one of the things, I kind of alluded to it before, but my assistant is no longer working with Congressional Dish. She found a full-time job, and so we wish Rebecca well. Thank you for all the work you did. But I am now back to doing all of this administrative stuff myself, which is why I've been working 12-hour days, and I'm really unhappy about that. But going back into the administrative stuff myself, I noticed these raises. So I apologize if I didn't acknowledge these before, but I would like to thank Stephen Hutto, who increased his subscription from $44.44 to $60.60 per month. Thank you, Stephen. That's awesome. Bob Wilkerson also switched from $15 a month to $20 per month. So thank you, Bob. And then Anthony Roberts, he switched from PayPal to paper checks. So now PayPal is no longer taking a cut. And over the summer, he increased his subscription from $10 to $20. So thank you so much, Anthony. I also got a raise from Nick Fox, who remained on PayPal, but this was a significant raise. He went from $5.15 to $15.45. And that subscription is taking care of the PayPal cut. So a lot of people are doing that. They'll contribute $5.15, which covers the 3% PayPal cut. And then this one at $15.45 also takes care of the PayPal cut, which means that Congressional Dish is getting the full 5 and the full 15. So very thoughtful of you. Thank you, Nick. We also have a new subscription. This is a fun number. This is from James Skoronsky, and this is 1234, $12.34 a month. So thank you, James. That's very fun. And we have another raise. This was a paper check from Noel Hutton, who increased his subscription from 10 to 12. So thank you, Noel. We also have 2 new subscribers on PayPal at the rate of $10 a month. That is Gary Batterson and Alan Schoen. Thank you very much, guys. And Heather Stiles, she is now contributing $6 a month and then sent in a $20 bonus on top of it along with this message. She says, "Hi, Jen. I just sent you a $20 bonus and wanted you to know why. I'm still working my way through your archived episodes and I just listened to episode 109 on GMOs. I admit that based on your previous comments about freaky corn and Monsanto, I fully expected you to go full anti-GMO. I cringed when I saw the title of the episode and thought about skipping it. Thankfully, I quickly abandoned that impulse because I realized that you have never given me reason to believe that you are vulnerable to fear-mongering and certainly not without actually looking into the facts of an issue. As a final reassurance, I Googled your guest, Cara Santa Maria, and upon seeing who she was and what she does, I knew I could trust what you were doing, and I should have always known that you would defer to the facts. Thank you for your continued commitment to honest and ethical journalism, even when I am certain you must have experienced some blowback for doing so on this issue. Boy, did I ever." Back to Heather's note. She says, "I know this episode must feel like ancient history for you, but it was brand new to me. And listening to you and Cara have such an excellent science-based discussion on the topic of GMOs was very inspiring. There were times I wanted to jump up and cheer in agreement, but I think my husband and my cats would have assumed that I lost my sanity. Thank you again and keep it up. I can't wait to get caught up to your present day episodes." Heather, thank you so much for sending me a positive message about that episode. A lot of people were really pissed at me because I didn't say that GMOs were evil. I just, after looking and trying real hard to find studies that backed that up, I just didn't find them. And Cara knows a lot about the subject. So a little bit of follow-up, though, on that episode. That bill ended up becoming law in a slightly different form. So in the next episode I'm producing for you guys is going to be the story of the 114th Congress. And for that, I'm going to be looking at the bills that became laws and letting you know the gist of what most of those were. You know, for this Congress, this was a tougher one for me because in the 113th Congress, I was trying to read every bill. And now a lot of them are getting by me because I'm going so in depth on the ones I do cover. And so in this next episode, I will give you the update on what actually became law in relation to the GMO labeling that we talked about in that episode. But yeah, thank you so much for appreciating that episode because I liked it. But yeah, I took so much backlash for that. I mean, people, they get their ideas about something and they just refuse to let it go no matter what the evidence says. And here's the gist of the blowback. Most of the people that sent me the angry emails were talking about the pesticides used on GMOs. Very few people were talking about the plants themselves because there's no evidence that the plants themselves are really any different. But what is happening is that they're being genetically modified so that they can handle being covered in pesticides. And that's what scares people. It's the pesticides, not the GMOs. And I think we have to start separating those two issues. Obviously, this is not ancient history for me because I'm still getting these emails, but very few of them are as nice as yours. So that's kind of my conclusion from the whole thing. I mean, I probably produced that about 6 months ago, and I think we just need to separate GMOs and pesticides because they're not the same thing. There you go. Okay, we also are getting $5.15 a month from Jake Ramsey, who $5.15, that covers the PayPal cut. So thank you, Jake. And then we have a bunch of new $5 a month subscribers. I'm going to name you guys all at once. We now are getting $5 a month from Cavan Moon, Buford Conchig, Hillary Moran, Brian Moynihan, Ben Monteirth, and Michelle Chen. And Michelle left a note. She said, "Thank you so much for doing this podcast, even though it's not exactly lucrative. It is a strongly needed service that our mainstream journalists should be doing, and it's terrible that they're not. Keep up the good work. Thank you." Thank you, Michelle, and thank you to Jake, Cavan, Buford, Hillary, Brian, and Ben. I appreciate your contributions. We're also now getting $4 a month from Phil Colburn and another $5 bonus on top. And this is someone who discovered the podcast recently through No Agenda. And I just mentioned the hosts, John C. Dvorak and Adam Curry. They're the hosts of No Agenda. And like I said, they are the masters of the value for value model. And they have been coaching me this entire time in how to do this. And they've encouraged the podcast. And Adam recently went to New York where he did a panel with basically like the titans of the radio industry and basically told all of them that their industry was failing and that podcasts is the new radio. And while he was there, he spoke to who I believe the guy was the CEO of NPR and told him about Congressional Dish. And so that was really awesome. But by telling this story, a lot of No Agenda listeners discovered Congressional Dish and are now being welcomed into the Congressional Dish community. And what's awesome is that these people are people that understand the value for value model and have already shown up to contribute. And I love the No Agenda listeners so much. And Phil is one of them. And he left a note along with his subscription and contribution. He said, "Thanks for lifting blinds on U.S. politics and law. I also want to thank you for the EpiPen episode." Phil, you are very, very welcome. We also have a new subscription, $3 a month from Peter Huffnagel. He also contributed an extra $25 one time on top of that. And he said, "Just listen to your latest education episode. Excellent as all I've listened to so far are. Just started listening, though probably a dozen of your old episodes in a week, and I found you from the School of Podcasting interview. I've been a long-time Dan Carlin listener, both hardcore history and common sense, and I posted a suggestion to his common sense board that he should interview you for a show. I think you jive well on your views on Congress, plus it might boost your listenership and donations." I love that you did that. That is the coolest thing because honestly, I'm now going on a bunch of podcasts. I'm paying someone to set those up for me. Another reason why I'm so tired. But it is so helpful when you reach out to other podcasters and tell them that I would be a good fit for their shows. Now, I know that Dan Carlin does mostly solo shows, but even just putting stuff on the message board, other people will see it. So, I mean, just spreading the word about the podcast the way you guys have, you have been the marketing team, you remain the marketing team. And I love that. That was such a great idea. So thank you for posting that on Dan Carlin's board. Back to Peter's note, he said, "Sent you $25 and signed up for $3 a month for now. It's not much, but I might bump it up more and donate more later, but I'm currently laid off / unemployed, and I'm sure you understand. Keep up the good work, Pete." And I absolutely understand that, and I really appreciate you contributing even in the rough times. So thank you, and I hope things turn around for you quickly in the near future. And then I also want to mention Brandon Shipley. Brandon Shipley is a current subscriber. He's been contributing monthly for a while now, but he sent in 2 checks, and one was for $90 and one was for $30. And this is the note that came with it. He said, "Jen, I didn't realize my monthly donation had stopped a few months ago. I apologize. I must have screwed it up by accident when I tried to increase it and only sent one instead of recurring. You should have 2 checks headed your way tomorrow, a $30 check that should be monthly and a $90 check as back pay for June, July, and August. Keep up the great work. It is very much appreciated, Brandon Shipley." So that's awesome. I not only got a raise to $30 a month, so thank you, Brandon, but he checked himself and noticed that the checks weren't coming in. And honestly, with paper checks, I have no way to know when they stop. So you're going to have to kind of do your own babysitting of your bank on that. And Brandon did. So, sorry, was getting a phone call. Yeah, thank you, Brandon. That is so nice of you. I so appreciate your support. And that's kind of hilarious too, that I don't know. I just love it. Like the back pay, the whole thing. I saw the 2 checks. I'm like, what the hell is going on? So just very, very cool. Thank you, Brandon. And by the way, that might not be the last time I get a phone call while doing this. My dog is sick. My little Abby here, her favorite toy in the whole world are little tiny squeaky balls, like the little tennis ball looking things. And we've noticed that she's been stripping the balls and eating the fuzz off of them. And so let's see, I'm recording this on Friday morning. On Wednesday night, she had a little accident on the carpet here. And then she threw up in my bed the next morning and then got sick again on the carpet. And so we took her to the vet, and it turns out that she has some mysterious substance in her stomach. It cost me about $500-$600 to find this out. And we don't really know what to do about that at this point. So I'm convinced that it is the outside of a tennis ball that is floating around in her stomach. And so we are trying to get that out of her system before we resort to surgery. But at the moment, I have my phone on in case the vet calls or my husband calls. And so that is why I'm being rude. I usually turn off my phone for this segment, and today I'm not going to. So there you go. Moving on. So those are all the new subscribers. Thank you to all the new subscribers, because you guys are the reasons why I have a budget and why I can afford to hire a new assistant, hopefully as fast as I possibly can, because I'm killing myself here. We also have a bunch of people that contributed one-time contributions, which are just as important. These are the ones that I put in the bank account, and these are the way I'm able to travel. Like, for instance, I'm going to go to Florida in February. I'm going to be keynoting at PodFest, which is super, super exciting. I think that's the first time I've told you this. I think it just became official. Yeah, I'm keynoting at a podcast festival. That's insane. So I need to travel there, obviously. And so that's what I do with the one-time contributions. I put them aside for opportunities for marketing and improving the podcast whenever those arise. So those contributions, they matter just as much. And I'm thrilled to tell you that Chris Simpson, who has been a big time subscriber for a long time, he contributed an extra $100 on top of his subscription this month. And he said, "Hey, Jen, you should be receiving an extra $100 from me via PayPal. Consider this a thank you for the EpiPen episode. I want you to know that I watched/listened to nearly 4 hours of testimony before your episode's release. While watching, I had many thoughts of, I wish I had the time to mash some of these clips together. And a few days later, guess what? You did it for me." The level of doublespeak from Miss Bresh in this hearing was mind-blowing. I don't know if it was refreshing or just plain hilarious to hear the mostly bipartisan contempt for the actions of Milan. My favorite moment was with Mick Mulvaney of South Carolina. You played a piece of his rant, but I think his entire 5 minutes is worth hearing. You can hear how he so wants to blame the situation on Obamacare and government bureaucracy, and he's not comfortable with all these other questions about her compensation, boardroom discussions, and airplane flights. He's clearly frustrated. But then it's like he has this great epiphany where the level of fuckery gets too much for him, and he scolds her with the "you get what you deserve" line. So classic. And Chris, I so agree with you. That was my favorite thing of the whole hearing too. Back to his note, he says, "As always, thank you for the show, and I hope these extra funds help. I would love to get your thoughts on S2040, aka the JASTA, the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act. I've read through the bill and all of the U.S. code that it modifies, but I still don't understand exactly how an individual could sue another country. Take care, Chris." Well, ask and ye shall receive. We apparently are on the same track on the stuff we want to hear on Congressional Dish. But yeah, that $100 helps a lot. I think that puts me over the edge to where that paid for the audio editing. So I broke even on the EpiPen episode, and I did kind of hurt myself in doing it because I put myself behind on the education episode, and it kind of reverberated into this one too. So as much as I like those hearing episodes and I do want to do more of them, I wouldn't expect more of them in the next couple of months. I really do need to get more help before I can put in more time on bonus episodes. But I do appreciate how many people appreciated that episode, and I'm trying to figure out a way to do more of those for you. That's where I'm going to have to leave it. Let's see. We also got a $100 check from Steve McMahon of Haver, Montana. Steve has been a longtime supporter of Congressional Dish, very consistent. And this week he said, "Jen, I listened to your EpiPen episode. Good work as always. Hope your sister and her baby are fine." They are, and they're so cute. My little niece, she's 3 years old, and she doesn't want to leave her baby sister's side. It's like the cutest thing in the whole world. We're all so in love. But anyway, back to his note, he said, no, I did not listen to the debate. It has not been worth a shit since the League of Women Voters bowed out in 1988. Yes, I am that old and then some. Please keep up the good work, and some of us do appreciate it, Steve McMahon. Thank you, Steve. I know you do. You're one of my favorites. I didn't watch the debate either, actually. I watched the first one, and then the second one, I had been at the Raider game, and we were having so much fun. Like, we tailgated, and then the game we actually won, and it was a close game, and we beat the Chargers, so it's a division game, and that's all kinds of fun. And we were just having a good day, and we just decided not to ruin it. And it turns out it was a big old hate fest. And I'm not voting for either of them anyway. Like, that much I already know. I can't vote for Trump or Hillary. So it's like, why do I need to watch their reality show? So I didn't watch it. I might watch the third one. I don't even know what day it's on. So it's kind of like, if I'm bored, I'll watch it. If I have better things to do, I won't. But yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm not learning anything from it. So I'd rather watch a hearing, to be honest. Let's see. Moving on, we also got $100 from Sean Connolly, who says in the morning, which No Agenda listeners will understand. Thank you, Sean. We also got $55.55 from Mark Borges. Borges, I think is how I would say this. And he said, Adam Curry mentioned your podcast on the No Agenda show, so I had a listen. Really enjoyed the analysis of the Every Student Succeeds Act. I will definitely tune in for more episodes like this. Thank you, Mark. See, the No Agenda people, they're showing up in full force. Love you guys. We also got $55 from an anonymous Nick, and anonymous Nick says, thank you and your team for your hard work on Congressional Dish. During Congressional Dish 135, you mentioned that people don't like shows on topics like education. That makes no sense to me. First, I don't see how topics like Libya are sexy because lots of people died when they didn't have to. And you know what? I probably shouldn't have used that word. What I mean by sexy is kind of like sensational. Things that talk about like dictators and, you know, the geopolitics behind like why we're bombing a country. Like, it's just more of a fascinating story than breaking down an education bill. But I'm with you on this. Like, I shouldn't have used that word, and I apologize. Back to Nick's note, it said, it is an important topic, not a sexy one. Education is perhaps one of the most important topics that can be discussed because the success of a nation's educational system is critically important to the success of every, why can't I say success? Critically important to the success of every nation. Below is one of my favorite quotes. You are one of the ones who has stepped into the arena. Quote, it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who never know victory nor defeat. Theodore Roosevelt. That's a great quote, and I'm honored that you put me in that category. Back to his note, he says, P.S. Fucking stop censoring the swear words. It's really annoying. This golf swing, and it is a golf swing, not a fly swatter. This golf swing remains the most controversial thing about Congressional Dish, but it has an actual purpose. The purpose of the golf swing is so that this show can be broadcast around the world because there are countries, including China and India, that have a lot of people, including a lot of ex-Americans who still have the right to vote. Those countries, anytime that there's a podcast that has explicit on it, they won't allow those podcasts to be aired in their countries. And so by putting in the golf swing, it allows me to have the clean label, which allows Congressional Dish to be broadcast around the world. That's the reason I do it, because my only other choice is to not swear, and that is censoring myself, and I'm all about not censoring myself in any way. And so I have a mouth like a construction worker / trucker / dirty little tramp girl. And I love the swear words. And so I don't want to stop using them. And so the golf swing is my compromise. Now, what I can tell you is one of the projects that I'm working on right now is for subscribers. I'm hoping the beginning of next year. That's my target date to have this launched. But I want to launch the Congressional Dish Green Room, where I can do interviews and just kind of talk about how the business is going or do, like have a Facebook Live event and just throw the whole thing up there. And that's going to be completely unedited. So I know right now that you contributed a one-time contribution, but when the green room opens up, if you want to hear me say the swear words without the golf swing, that's where you can go. But as far as like the main Congressional Dish show, I have to keep doing it or else they'll be pulled from those countries. And that we just can't have that. The people need to vote in those countries too, if they're expats. So that's the reason. I'm sorry you're annoyed, but I'm going to keep annoying you. There you go. We also got $50 from Randall Myers, who said, love what you're doing. Value for value. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Randall. We also got $50 from Chris Nichols, who said, I'm from the UK and think the work you do is excellent. I've owed you this for a while. Thanks, Chris. And see, this is what I'm talking about. People from other countries are listening to this podcast, and they can only do this if this podcast is available in their countries, hence the golf swing. But thank you, Chris. We also got $50 from Henry Biglin, who said, first-time listener, Congressional Dish 135 was awesome. That was the educational episode. Keep up the great work. Thank you very much. We also got $50 from Derek Voderhart, who said, love what you're doing. Keep up the great work. And thank you. Thank you, Derek. We also got $50 from Jeremy Johnson. Thank you, Jeremy. And then we also got $40. This was a transfer because bank transfers are possible too if you guys want to go down that alley. And I'm happy to verify whatever, bank you guys are using. But we got a $50 transfer from a name that I can't possibly pronounce because the letters were not in English. Once again, proving to you that the podcast is not only getting listeners, but support from outside the United States. But whoever you are, I'm sure you know, and I'm sure you're laughing right now at my inability to even guess what your name is. But thank you for supporting the podcast. We also got $30 from John Anderson, who said, education episode was great. Also, I do not support your choice of Gary Johnson, but I value your research greatly and hard work. I'm curious about your view on the recent news involving the Koch brothers donating to Gary Johnson. Is that really news? Is basically my reaction to that, because the Koch brothers, one of the Koch brothers, I think it was David, ran as the vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. So of course they would donate to Gary Johnson. They're all about freedom for businesses to do whatever the hell they want. So that makes perfect sense to me. It's not surprising at all. And again, Gary Johnson is not my choice. I'm not telling you to vote Gary Johnson. What I'm telling you is that if you want someone other than Trump and Hillary, there is a strategy for Gary Johnson to be someone that can get in. I think it would be much harder for Jill Stein. That's all I'm saying with that episode. I'm not telling you who to vote for. I don't care who you vote for president. I really, really, really don't. Moving on, we also got another $28 from Steve McMahon. Is this my same Steve? I think this is my same Steve, who said, Jen, you are allowed to vote for who you want. Small-minded people can't stand someone who does not think the same. Looking for information about anything going on with the commission set up to sell off assets in Puerto Rico. If you hear anything, could you mention it on your podcast? I posted a small donation to help. Monthly subscriptions should be waiting for you back home. I hope to increase the subscription soon. Hang in there, and I will leave you with our mantra from my time in the service. Life's a bitch, then you die. Have a nice day. I know it sounds strange, but in some days it makes sense. Steve McMahon. As for what's going on in Puerto Rico, honestly, I haven't heard anything specific since that commission took over basically governing the financial assets of Puerto Rico. I don't know what's going on. So yes, if I hear anything, I will keep you updated. But one of the biggest struggles that I have with Congressional Dish is I cover so many different topics that it's really hard for me to do follow-ups. So if any of you, Angela, talking to you here, if any of you have information for me, please send it to me. Twitter is the best way to get me to actually read it. You can also send it to my email, but I don't check my email every day. Twitter is the best way to get it to me. But if you're not on Twitter, email me, jen@congressionaldish.com, and help me stay in the loop on this stuff because I'm barely keeping my head above water here. So I'll do the best I can. Let's see. We also got an anonymous Bitcoin contribution. This is the biggest one in a while. This one was worth $25.77. So thank you very much for that. We also got another $25 check from repeat contributor Victor Kitt. Thank you very much, Victor. We also got $25 from an anonymous contributor who says, I've wanted to donate for a while, but Congressional Dish 134 really pushed me to it. I really loved being able to listen to a congressional hearing in a digestible manner. Thanks. I really liked that episode too. I'm going to do my best to give you more of those, I promise. It's just, I need an assistant. I really, really do. So on it. I really thank you for the feedback. I also got $25 from Bob Fremgen. Thank you, Bob. We also got $25 from Dante Mabin, who said, I made a $25 donation and figured I finally should kick something into the bucket of freedom. I wanted to throw my 2 cents into that Electoral College episode. I think it's foolish that people would unsubscribe over the TPP of all things, and I can only imagine that it's liberals that believe their own groupthink is superior to everyone else's. I'm going to have to stop you there. Stop it. Stop it with the liberal and conservative stuff. Everyone who does groupthink is guilty of groupthink. If you're liberal, conservative, libertarian, if you worship the flying spaghetti monster, if you're religious, all of that is groupthink. All of it. And none is more superior than the other. So I hate to yell at someone who contributed to the podcast, but no, liberals are not more guilty of this than anybody else. All people who consider themselves part of a label are guilty of groupthink. That is just the facts. Back to Dante's message, it says, I wanted to mention this podcast episode on why I personally do not find a Trump presidency to be equal to a Hillary presidency. Do I think Hillary is the best candidate? Hell no. But no one in her circle refers to Japanese internment as a good idea. Okay. Anyway, I really love these last 2 episodes. As someone working in education, information like this is vital. The more I listen to your podcast, the more I'm convinced that the presidency is a red herring and local and congressional legislature is the most important to our lives. Keep at it. Dante, I'm so glad you said that at the end, because that is the main point. I don't even want to get into who's the better candidate between Hillary and Trump. Just no. But you're right. Local and congressional candidates are the most important things. And I really hope that from here on forward, that's where we're putting our focus. So thank you for contributing to the podcast, because I am going to focus on the congressional stuff. And honestly, this whole, I did 2 episodes because people asked me to, one on the primary and one on the general. It's the only times that I jumped into the presidential thing, and that was already too much. So for 2020, I actually don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if I'm going to cover the presidential election at all. It's just such a circus at this point, and it brought so much negativity into my life that I might just leave it at that. We have the Electoral College episode. If you listen to that, you kind of understand, or no, you completely understand how the system works, especially now that the episode is fixed. But yeah, there's no reason for me to go into it again next time. So I might not even talk about it at all. I'm just so disgusted by the whole thing. Let's see. Moving on. We also got $25 from Jeffrey Anderson of Stuart, Florida, who said, I just want you to know that the episode on EpiPen was outstanding. I loved your editing so that the back and forth questions and answers made sense and moved the discussion forward. I donated in the hopes that you'll do more of this. A new fan, Jeff. Thank you. You're definitely pushing me in that direction. The number of people talking about that EpiPen episode, it's incentivizing me to do more of them. It really, truly is. Let's see. We also got $25 from Brian Zometa of North Hills, California. Thank you, Brian. We also got $25 from another Brian. This is from Brian Lambert of I don't know where. Thank you, Brian. We also got $20 from Jessica Rhodes. Jessica Rhodes is my agent, and I adore her, and we have so much in common. And her husband is a subscriber, and then Jessica kicked in an extra 20. So you're great. Thanks so much, Jess. Oh, and I went on Jessica's podcast. It's called Roads to Success. Her last name is spelled RHODES. And we had a great conversation. And that's a fun one to listen to because it's not only me on another podcast, but I'm speaking to a friend. That's a good one. I will put that link for you in the show notes. And once I get an assistant, I'm working on having someone put up all the links to all these podcasts that I've been on the website. But like I said, I'm just keeping my head above water. I've been putting in 12-hour days and I can't keep living like this. So I promise I am going to have all these links available soon. I need help. So yeah, that will be available. But the Jessica one, I will put in the show notes for this episode. So thanks, Jessica. We also got $20 from Michael Barrows, who said, in support of your discretion in the selection of subject matter. Excellent podcast. Ask your listeners to lobby Majority Report and the Young Turks to interview you. Hey, listeners, can you please lobby the Majority Report and the Young Turks to interview me? I know that Sam Cedar knows who I am. I met him at the really shameful podcast awards at the last New Media Expo. And last as in I don't think there'll ever be another one ever again because it was so bad. But I did meet Sam right after he won his award and ran out the door. And so I'm on his radar. And then the Young Turks, I have an old friend from college who works there. But I don't even know if he knows that I'm doing the podcast, to be honest. And so I'm not really on the Young Turks radar at all. but I could definitely have some interesting conversations with just about anyone who works there. So yeah, if you want to reach out to them, that would be super helpful. And it also helps that my dad lives in West LA. So anytime I go to Los Angeles, I have a place to stay, I have a car, and the Young Turks, they film out of Culver City. So I can go down there anytime super easily. So that's a really good one to lobby too. So thank you for the suggestion. It's a good idea. We also got $20 from Michael Elfassi, who said, "Hi, Jen, I'm sending this one time to buoy the drop in subscriptions. Thank you." He said, "Regarding the green room, I would certainly increase my subscription both to cover the additional cost and to pay you for the additional work. Thanks for serving the meat and veggies on Congressional Dish. We appreciate it." Thank you very much. I also got $20 from Adam Selby, who said, "Fantastic episode about charter schools." Wasn't really about charter schools. It just kind of ended up that way, didn't it? He just said, "I also enjoyed your rant about supporting Johnson. Fuck those types of Clinton supporters. Vote for your candidate, not out of fear." I 100% agree with that. I agree with that sentiment. I'm going to vote for, I think, the best person. However, I would possibly vote strategically if I was in a small state for the reasons that I laid out in the Electoral College episode. The reason that I'm thinking about not participating in the strategy that I put out there, which I kind of like, is that I'm in California. And one of the things I learned about how the Electoral College system works is that my vote counts so much less than the votes for people in, Utah, New Mexico, Alaska, Wyoming, New Hampshire, both of the Dakotas. I mean, those are the states where you guys can really vote strategically and get it into the House of Representatives. But that's the other thing too. So much has changed in the past few weeks and will probably change again in the last month. But right now, it's looking like Hillary Clinton's going to win this thing in a landslide. And so the whole strategy of putting it into the House of Representatives can only happen in the way that I laid out in a close election. If she's blowing it out of the water, it's a moot point. Just vote your conscience. But if your conscience is taking you outside of the Democratic and Republican parties, pick one. But let's all just add to that percentage of people that are not participating in their parties. I mean, that's really where I'm at this point. But that could change in the next month. I don't really know. That's the whole point. That episode wasn't about me. It wasn't about my vote. So still upset a little bit. But yes, thank you, Adam. We also got $20 from Scott Penton, who said, "Sorry for the low amount. I'm currently looking for work and don't have much. But on this episode, you said you were voting for Gary Johnson." Thank you. Jesus Christ. Hopefully there's more of us. I'm a new listener. Adam Curry mentioned you on No Agenda, so I checked out your show and I've subscribed. Hopefully I can get my business started. His business is going to be 88.co. So that's 8, spell out the words 88.co, and donate more. And he said, "Best of luck to you. Keep the shows coming." Thank you, Scott. I'm sorry to disappoint you and that I don't know if I'm voting for Gary Johnson. But again, what does it matter what I do with my vote? We each get a vote. Do with it what you will. The point is that third parties can actually win the presidency. That's what matters. And so that's the information I was trying to get out there. I'm sure you can understand that. Thank you for the support, and in the morning to you, my friend. We also got $20 from Cameron Cochran. Thank you, Cameron. We got $20 from Jesse Astbury, who said, "I just listened to your podcast for the first time, 2 episodes actually, and I love it. I don't care what tone you use or whom you're voting for." Yes! Your take on the he says the Every Child Succeeds bill. It's actually the Every Student Succeeds bill, and I've been calling it the Student Success Act. So that one is a tough one to remember. But he says that my take on that bill is invaluable, if alarming. He also says, "I also appreciate your nuanced and mature take on the TSA. Keep doing what you're doing. I will have to give on an ad hoc basis, I'm afraid, as I'm a drunk and always on the cusp of letting it all fall apart." Jesse, aren't we all on the cusp of falling apart? So I appreciate your honesty. And yeah, thank you very much. I mean, $20, that's worth 2 beers in the Bay Area. So yeah, thank you very much. I also got $18 from Brooks Rogers. Brooks is one of the people that transfers his money straight into my bank account, so that's always fun. Thank you very much, Brooks. And then we also got, this is fun, 1776 from Kaya Zakoiglu. Kaya Zakoiglu of Sherman Oaks, California. I'm probably butchering your name. I'm sorry, doll. But Kaya says, 135 was my first episode. Thanks to Adam Curry giving you a shout out on a recent No Agenda episode. Keep up the fantastic and much needed work. See, I told you No Agenda's showing up in full force. You guys are the best. We also got $15 from Byron Verboot, who said, "Fuck the quitters." Thank you, Byron. We got 1061 from Christopher Perry, who said, "Hi, Jennifer. I've been listening to your show since your appearance on the Higher Side Chats and thought it was finally time to step up and start contributing. Love the combination of shows about specific bills and other things like Puerto Rico and Libya episodes. And then your message got cut off by PayPal. When you guys are sending messages via PayPal, you might just want to email me if you want to say more than a couple of sentences, because this happens to people all the time. But I am having a lot more fun with the new format for Congressional Dish. I switched it over about a year ago from reading every single bill to really focusing on certain episodes. And I'm having a lot more fun with the content. And I think you guys are too. So I appreciate you saying that. All right, so we got $10 from Robert Perez, and Robert contributes regularly and always sends in a note. So here's his note. He said, "It wasn't 4 to 6 weeks as I expected," because he said that he might have to wait. But he said, "I appreciated the bonus episode, epi shame." And he said, "If diabetics can do this daily, why not at home with proper education for people with allergies? Why not all ambulance crews equipped with epi kits for $20? At home, people can drop a dose before an event and replace the vials of epinephrine for $20 or so." And that's a really good point, because the whole Mylan thing, the reason that people are buying their product specifically is their injector is apparently cool. I mean, I don't have allergies, so I don't know really what the big deal is. But if you just get epinephrine and put it in an actual syringe, it might not be the most pleasant way of getting it into your skin, and you might need some training of the people around you, but you can save a lot of money. So Mylan profiteering the way they are, I mean, $20 for a vial of actual epinephrine compared to they're now charging $600 per EpiPen, which does the same thing. It puts epinephrine in your bloodstream. That's one of the prices that we pay for profiteering in this way, is that people are going to do the less safe thing because it saves them a significant amount of money. But that is a good point. And I did get emails from people that do that very thing. They just get the straight epinephrine and they've taught themselves how to use needles. And that's how they're protecting themselves from their allergic reactions and also not going bankrupt at the same time. Back to Robert's note, he said, "Also, that discount Mylan is offering may be illegal when applied to Medicare and Medicaid." And then he gave me an article. So I looked into that, and he's absolutely right. This is from the Los Angeles Times. This was Mike Hiltzik of the Los Angeles Times, and the article says, quote, "What Mylan is doing is expanding its patient assistance program by providing eligible patients with a savings card worth up to $300 per prescription and doubling eligibility to households earning up to 400% of the federal poverty level, or $97,200 for a family of 4. Many of them, therefore, would pay nothing out of pocket for the device, which delivers a measured dose of epinephrine to stave off anaphylactic shock after eating peanuts or by, say, suffering a bee sting. The truth is, however, that these programs are detested by insurers, healthcare economists, and government agencies with good reason. In fact, they're illegal when applied to Medicare and Medicaid patients because they may violate federal anti-kickback laws, which bar payments made to induce patients to choose particular services. Insurers and government programs will have to cover everything beyond the copay or deductible at a price that can be as much as $600 for a 2-pack. Before Mylan began raising the price, it was about $100. Programs such as Mylan's actually preserve, not reduce, its pricing power and profits. By covering the out-of-pocket expense for the neediest and most vulnerable patients, the company hopes to quell the public uproar over its price boosts for the EpiPen. You'll notice that Mylan isn't offering to reduce the wholesale or retail price of the EpiPen. Insurers and the government programs will still have to pay its asking price. Its cost to cover copays for the relatively small number of customers served by their program will be vastly outweighed by its profits on the device, which racked up $1 billion in sales for the company last year at a profit margin that may approach 55%, unquote. So that kind of explains why in the hearing they refused to lower the price, because this is a way to get the government to pay the difference. So, and I love the strategy here on like an evil genius kind of way, because you and I will probably shut up if it's technically free for us. If you can go to the pharmacy when you walk into CVS and it says $0, you're probably not going to write to your congressman. But it's not $0. Mylan's paying for your copay and the government's paying the rest. That is so shady. And it's one of the reasons why I feel like we pay enough in taxes. And the bigger problem is that our tax money is getting diverted into private pockets, like exactly what Mylan is doing. So thank you for bringing that to my attention, Robert. That is awesome. I mean, awesome that you brought it to my attention. It's infuriating that that is the strategy behind it, but it explains so much of what we heard in that hearing. Back to Robert's note, he said, "Keep raging, but cite sources as you already do, so the hypersensitive, you know who you are, remain unarmed." Best, Robert Perez. Robert, love that note. Thank you. Oh, and so I also have another thing. I'm going off about this EpiPen a little bit, but I subscribe to some newsletters from like corporate lobbyists just to see like what the corporations are freaking out about. And I do this to get hope, you know? So it's like when the corporations are like, by the way, Congress might do this and it might affect your profits. That's something I feel like us people can jump onto and be like, okay, so there's some momentum behind this. And on this pharmaceutical stuff, the corporations are freaked out. So what this policy paper is, it's from Covington and Burling. And this is an organization that has some really high, powerful people in it. Like this is where the Attorney General, Eric Holder, came from. So these are going out to the people who are actually in power in both corporations and in government. And so I just want to read this whole thing to you because this gives me so much hope that we might be able to get something done in Congress on this pharmaceutical thing. So this is what it says. This was released on October 11th, 2016. It says the post-election period from the lame duck congressional session. Oh, and keep in mind as I'm reading this, that this is to the corporations, okay? So this is like from the lawyers to the corporations giving the corporations advice. All right. So it says the post-election period from the lame duck congressional session to the first 100 days and beyond of a new administration in Congress is expected to be a time of extraordinary, if not unprecedented, public policy debate on issues that impact pharmaceutical life sciences companies and interest groups. These issues present both significant threats and possible opportunities to all stakeholders. On the positive side, so the positive side to the corporations, the 114th Congress has unfinished business in the form of the House's 21st Century Cures Act and the Senate's companion package of medical innovation bills, provisions of which are intended to streamline FDA review and approval processes, as well as authorize key programs such as the Precision Medicine Initiative. And the prescription drug user fee authorization is also right around the corner. These positive developments for corporations could come at a cost to the life sciences industry, however, with growing indications that a proverbial perfect storm is brewing in the U.S. on issues surrounding pharmaceutical pricing. The presidential candidates, who find little else on which to agree, have criticized drug prices and espoused strong support for proposals, including ones that will allow the Health and Human Services Department to directly negotiate with manufacturers in the importation of lower-priced drugs from Canada and elsewhere that are anathema to industry. As shown in the pending Medicare Part B national demonstration project, presidential administrations, in addition to the bully pulpit, have used their perceived regulatory authority to elevate the executive branch role in the drug pricing debate in the absence of congressional action, and we would expect that to continue in the next administration. Furthermore, recent developments suggest that whoever the next president is might find willing partners in both parties on Capitol Hill on pharmaceutical pricing-related issues, regardless of the outcome of the general election in Congress. As evidenced in recent high-profile oversight and investigations, criticism of the pharmaceutical industry has become bipartisan fodder. Members on both sides of the aisle have to answer a growing chorus from their constituents who seek relief from high drug prices. So they have to listen to us. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. They listen to us when we call. So keep calling Congress because it's freaking out not only Congress, but the corporations. Back to the article, it says, while Republicans historically provided some level of firewall for efforts to fend off price controls, and other adverse policy prescriptions, the reservoir of political capital within the Republican Party is arguably less deep post-enactment of the Affordable Care Act. At the same time, there are fewer moderate Democrats who in the past helped defend the industry. Growing public opinion and ongoing critical publicity around drug prices contribute to a political environment that is more likely to result in active consideration of a variety of unfavorable legislative proposals in the drug pricing space. So flip that around. This is the advice that they're giving to the corporations. It's saying that because of our outcry, because we are calling our congressmen and writing articles and talking about drug pricing, that is more likely to result in something that is unfavorable to the drug manufacturers, but that would be favorable to those of us that need the drugs. This is great news, you guys. Back to the article, it says, to date, there has been a veritable menu of bipartisan options offered, which include, among many other things, requiring greater transparency by manufacturers who raise prices above a certain percentage, allowing the government to directly negotiate prices with manufacturers, importation of lower-priced drugs, reduction of the data exclusivity for biologics, Policy changes to encourage even greater utilization of generics, reform of patient assistance programs, and curtailing of certain practices in patent settlement agreements and REMS programs. Now, I don't know what that means, but that's a whole list of things that we're being told by the corporate lobbyists are possible in Congress, not only in the lame duck, but next year. So this might be an issue that we might want to hold on to and go for because we got them spooked. Back to the article, it says momentum for any or all of these proposals might further increase if Congress and the administration pursue a deficit-reducing budgetary deal because these drugs are costing us a shitload. That's why. Back to the article, or other policy priorities that might be paid for with policy changes affecting the Medicare program. The prospect for action on anti-industry proposals is further enhanced by the reality that congressional authorization of the industry-supported PDUFA will be on tap in 2017. So what we're being told there is that we should be looking out for whatever PDUFA is. The beginning next year, that's one of the stories that we need to follow because that is a must-sign legislation type thing that they're going to either do industry favors or do us drug pricing favors. That's a bill that I think we need to watch and fight for. Back to the note, it says, because PDUFA is considered must-pass legislation, it says it in the article. Because PDUFA is considered must-pass legislation, it is recognized as a prime moving vehicle to which any number of healthcare-related proposals might be attached. Booyah! It remains uncertain whether pharmaceutical pricing and access will continue to be more of a rhetorical subject or if the rhetoric translates into significant changes in federal policy. And you guys, that's up to us. If we want it to be federal policy, if we want action, we need to keep pushing on this issue because we're being told in no uncertain terms that it's so possible. Back to the article says, what is virtually certain is that this debate will rage on in the months ahead and that the outcome could have major ramifications for industry, whether or not new laws are ultimately enacted. Against this backdrop, it is imperative that stakeholders follow the anticipated fast-moving developments, understand the substantive implications and political prospects for various proposals, and where appropriate, engage in informed advocacy, lobbying on Capitol Hill with the administration and the public. So, pharmaceutical industry and their lawyers are spooked, and I am super excited to have that information ahead of time. And also, they're saying in their memos to each other that must-pass legislation is vehicles to get shit passed for industry. Oh my God, I like being right. It's so much fun. Even if the implications are like terrible for democracy. Okay, so Robert, you just started me on quite the rabbit hole, so thank you for your $10. We also got $10 from Dwight Rogers, who is a Twitter friend of mine. He said, Jen, I love your show and you're really doing a great service. I hate to be a vote shamer, but consider what a Trump presidency means to your friends of color and other religions. I'm not voting for Trump, so there you go. I guess that's why it's all hands on deck to stop him. Anyway, I hate that you got cancellations. Even though we disagree sometimes, I support you 100%. Thank you, Dwight. I know you do, and I will see you on Twitter. We also got $10 from Nathan Cox, who said, hey, Jen, thanks for the EpiPen hearing. Another vote for these hearing episodes. It gives me a clear consolidation of hearings, especially when the editing follows threads of conversations. I like this format of episode and found it very insightful to the thought processes of our congressmen and women, not just the bills they produce. Please continue this if you can. I would personally love to see what sort of actual follow-up there is to this hearing, as my spidey senses are telling me that this is a bit of a song and dance berating of the company with no teeth behind it. I've been going back and listening to other episodes and really enjoy your work, especially on TPP, Libya, and others. The research and context to the bills are very well thought out and executed. Thanks so much. Hope this helps. Nathan Huntsville of Alabama. Thank you, Nathan. Nathan of Huntsville, Alabama is how I meant to say that. So I just read you that thing on the pharmaceutical industry. And one thing that I do want to point out is that even though Bernie Sanders really didn't have a fair process presented to him to be the Democratic nominee within the Democratic National Committee, he did get his name out there. And so as far as people do watch Congress, a lot more people know who he is. And one of the things that he's been paying attention to is that hepatitis C thing that I mentioned in this episode, which is really, it's costing us so much tax money because of the price gouging. And now that this EpiPen thing has become something that is just all over like regular media, I do think that there is a chance that this isn't just a song and dance, but that depends heavily upon us keeping up the pressure on Congress. So I do appreciate your $10. What I would also appreciate is that you're in Alabama, man. Your congressmen are insane. So you can actually make a lot of difference on this by routinely calling your congressmen and senators and just keep letting them know that people care. And the thing is, they don't take down your name when you call. You just get put on like a tally. So it's like there's one more people that's pissed about the drug pricing. And that's just what happens. So if you call once a day, okay, you can single-handedly get more check marks on their tally being like, people care about this issue, they care about this issue, and let them know you're watching. So if this is something you want them to act on, please start calling your congressman. It is so important. And we can't give it up, after this election. In fact, I think during the lame duck in the beginning of the next session is the most important time to be putting pressure on your congressman, even though the eyes of everyone in this country generally goes away from politics. It's actually the worst time to be looking away. So that's my 2 cents. We also got $10 from Philip Cole, who says, I've been listening since seeing you on David Pakman. Love what you're doing. Cheers from down the way in Medford. I used to live in Medford, to tell you the truth. I think somewhere on social media it says that I'm living in Arlington still. I am not. I am in Walnut Creek, California, because my husband works in San Francisco and we can't afford to live in San Francisco. So we live an hour outside San Francisco. But I am 3,000 miles away from Medford. But I love Medford and I really miss going to Regina's in Wellington Circle. So go to Regina's for me and I'll live vicariously through your pizza. Let's see. We also got $10 from Jason. And I know that that's not the real Regina's. I do go into North End for the real Regina's. That is my favorite place. But I got to tell you, when you have like pizza it's that good walking distance from your house, yeah, I'll go to fake Regina's. No problem. So I'm not that elitist about which Regina's I go to. Although I've never been to the one on Route 1, but back to the thank yous. We also got $10 from Jason Katzenbach, and he said, I've been thinking about donating to the podcast for a while, but the fact that people had dropped you because of Gary Johnson episode annoyed me enough to overcome my laziness. I'm probably voting for Jill Stein, but I really appreciated that the episodes helped me reconsider my position. I'm still reconsidering it. Also, the Seahawks shout out didn't hurt. Thanks again for everything you do with this show. I think it's one of the most important pieces of journalism happening in our country. You can add me to the anti-golf swing tally, but I really love everything else about the show. By the way, I'm not sure if the checkbox to make recurring payments shows up later, but it doesn't seem to appear in the original dialog box. So this is what's going on with the Make It Monthly checkbox. This is for people that are trying to subscribe monthly on PayPal. I don't know why, but you can't do it with a mobile device. You can't do it with a tablet like an iPad, and you can't do it with a phone. You have to do it with an actual computer for the Make It Monthly checkbox to appear. This is why PayPal is so annoying to so many people, but that's what the problem is. But Jason is saying that he will try and figure out a way to fix it. That's what you got to do, my friend. But thank you for the contribution. I think I've already touched on all of your points. There you go. So thank you. We also got $10 from Matthew Mumau. Thank you, Matthew. $10 from Tim Giblin. Thank you, Tim. We also got $10 from Emmett Stewart. There's so many notes today. He also sent a note. He said, I want you to know that not all of your audience feel a need to give you grief over your voting plans. I honestly respect your decision and am quite impressed with your reasoning and strategy, which you gave during an educational segment about the Electoral College. See, Emmett gets what I was doing. Second, your specialty episode was very informative, and I, for one, would appreciate to hear more of them. Obviously, donations count on this discussion, so here you go. Know that your work is greatly appreciated by this expat living in Malta. See? He can still vote and he doesn't live in the United States. This is why I do the golf swing. Where the news of what happens back home is only available from media sources I don't trust. I trust you. Oh my God. Thank you. Please keep up the amazing work. As often or not as you wish to give it, I, for one, will be on this side of the planet waiting with anticipation. With great and humble respect, Emmett Stewart, Semper Fi. Thank you, Emmett. And I love that you guys, or at least Emmett, trusts me. That's great. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do with all the show notes. That's why I feel like the show notes are so important, even though they're so time consuming without an assistant right now. It's because why should you trust me if I'm not giving you my sources? And that's what irritates me so much about the people in the mainstream media. They get paid millions and millions of dollars and have teams of hundreds of people, and they still don't give us their sources. That's why I do that. And I'm glad to hear that it is building the trust. That's really my goal with that. So thank you very much. We got a bunch more $10 donations from Caleb Frew, Hassan Maynard, Stuart Walsh, and Limelight Agency. I don't know what that business is, but Limelight Agency, thank you very much. And thank you, Stuart, Hassan, and Caleb. We also got $10 from Donald Gogan, who said he's a new listener. John and Adam sent me. No agenda once again. I know this isn't much, but times are lean right now. I will give as I can. I know you will. Thank you very much. We also got $10 from Jonathan Collender, who said, hi, it's not very much, but I appreciate you doing podcasts on the not very sexy bills. And this is from Jonathan in Waco, Texas. And I'm sorry that I called the Libya episode sexy. I'm not really sure what word I'm looking for there, but you know that like some of these, they just garner more attention than others. And I've just noticed that the bill episodes are not getting the download numbers that the war-related episodes are. And I kind of understand that, you know? But thank you very much. And I appreciate your appreciation of the bill episodes because those are the hardest for me and the most important. And it's nice to know that they're appreciated. We also got 9/11 from Sean Florian, very apt with this episode. But he said, in the morning, I wanted to leave a message with my donation of 9/11 for the upcoming 9/11 victims episode, which your donation is being thanked on. So just want to say thanks for the podcast and punch my friend Ryan Mulder in the mouth. So thank you very much. No Agenda listeners get that one too. There's a whole, other language that goes on in No Agenda. It's pretty fun. And I'm happy that I understand what you guys are saying to me. We also got 666 from Sean Regalado, and he said truth. So thank you, Sean. We got $6 from Daniel Scott, who said, heard about you on the No Agenda show. Just finishing listening to my first episode. I'm happy to pay you to read these bills so I don't have to. Thank you, Daniel. We also got $5.24 from our good friend Bud Johnson. I can always count on Bud. And he sent another lovely card, said, keep up the great work. This is the worst election cycle ever in my lifetime. It's the worst in mine too. So thank you, Bud. We also got $5 from current subscriber Leslie Behan. This is a bonus. And she said, thanks for the episode on the EpiPen hearing. I was outraged by the corruption and greed. So glad I didn't have to watch all 4 hours of the hearing. You do a great job of condensing the info into an hour-long podcast that I can listen to while working out. This PayPal donation is an addition to my monthly check to encourage you to do more episodes like this. I will spread the word on Facebook about Congressional Dish. Thank you, Leslie. And honestly, now that I'm reading these out loud, there's a lot of people that contributed because of the EpiPen episodes. So I'm definitely taking that to heart. So thanks, guys, because here's another one. Sam Appleton, $5. He said, for the EpiPen hearing. This was so informative and satisfying. Thank you for the great edit. Hope this donation helps you recoup the costs, Sam. And it did. So thank you. We also got $5 from Jeffrey Barrows. I haven't heard from you in a while. He says this is way overdue. Okay. Thanks, Jeff. We also got $5 from Benjamin Rader, who said, hey, I discovered your show because Adam mentioned your podcast on No Agenda. I listened to the charter school episode and was hooked. Thank you for your awesome content. You're very welcome. We also got $5 from Andrew Duncan, who said, hey, Jen, I want to donate after your episode on the charter school bill since it affected me the most as a high school student. What you're doing is wonderful, and it helps keep me sane in a world of political disinformation. Thanks for all your hard work. Thank you, Andrew. We also got $5 from Monica Bromberg. Thank you, Monica. $3 from Alexander Grosjean. Thank you, Alexander. We got an anonymous Bitcoin contribution worth $2.23. Thank you, Anonymous. We got $2 from Jake Ramsey, who said, I just found your podcast. It's great stuff. And we got $1 from William Hawthorne. Thank you very much. And just when you think I'm done, I'm not, because I have a stack of packages here, and I have no idea how long these are waiting at the post office, but I will open them now on the air. So, getting out my scissors. All right. Package number 1 is a book called Blood Republic, a novel by James Duncan. And Blood Republic is a political thriller for a politically corrupt time, deceitful politicians, crazed generals, NSA surveillance, and viral hate. Blood Republic examines modern extremism in a heart-pumping thriller with the fate of the country at stake. Will America survive its next election or collapse into a new civil war of conservatives versus liberals? Wow, sounds right up my alley. Let's see who sent this to me. This is from Jim Duncan. He said, Dear Jen, please accept this copy of Blood Republic and thanks of the assistance you provided during its writing. Oh my God, it's from the author. Many of the themes and ideas presented in the novel were actually solidified while listening to Congressional Dish. With this story, I'm hoping to raise people's awareness to the dangers of political corruption, even as they are being entertained. The book is about the country coming undone during a disputed presidential election and collapsing into a second civil war. Hopefully, if I can get the word out for people to read it, the fictional horrors within it won't come true. I hope you find it enjoyable and thought-provoking. Please never stop fighting for the truth in the madness of a polarized modern America. And thanks for helping research the book. Jim Duncan. Oh my God, this is so cool. Thank you. I'm going to Mexico for Thanksgiving, and I know what I'm bringing because I wanted to read a book that wasn't like homework. Oh my God, I'm so excited about this. Thank you for sending me a copy. Thank you for writing this book. This is the coolest thing I think I've ever seen in my entire life. So thank you very much. And to the people that are not Jim, I'm going to put this in the Amazon store right up front so that you guys can support Jim and Congressional Dish. And this is so awesome. So yes, I'm going to read this book. That is so cool. Thank you, Jim. Wow. Oh my God. That's amazing. Okay. So I'm sorry. I the rest of these packages, I don't know if you're going to beat that, but let's see. What else do we have here? We have all the president's bankers. I have wanted this one for a while. This one came from, hi Jen, thanks a lot for doing what you do, from Divi Yanish. Thank you very much. I have wanted this book for a long time. Very cool. Let's see. Wow. So this next one's a biggie. This is Command and Control. There's actually fuzz in the envelope. Whew. This is an old book. It's called Command and Control, Nuclear Weapons, the Damascus Accident, and the Illusion of Safety by Eric Schlosser, the author of Fast Food Nation, which is actually one of my favorite all-time books. This is cool. 2013, yeah, so it's not an old book. Cool. I mean, I definitely need to learn more about all the nuclear stuff because God knows that it's being legislated all the time. All right, this one looks like homework, but I am down to do homework. So thank you very, very much. And then last package of the day and the last thank you of the day. This one is called Plain and Honest Men, The Making of the American Constitution. And actually someone said that they were going to send this to me. Let's see. I'm not seeing the name in here anywhere. Oop, here it is. Yeah, actually, Amazon didn't give me a name of who sent this, but I assume you know who you are, so thank you very much. And I do think it will be interesting to learn how the Constitution was crafted, because from what I've learned lately, it does seem like it's thrown together in the same way our government funding bills are, where it's just like, well, everyone's going to be unhappy with it, so that must be the best we can do. So yeah, I'm excited about all these books, especially the ones sent to me by Jim, the author. Thank you so much. I know that this, God, I'm looking at my thing here. We're at over an hour in the thank yous this week. So I really appreciate all of the support and all of the notes. And this was a much needed uplift for me. There's been a lot of things going on behind the scenes that have been frustrating. One of them being losing my assistant. And so if you've listened this far, then I think you've qualified yourself for the job, because I know that I can go to Odesk or whatever the hell they call themselves now, or monster.com, and find people that can help me. But honestly, I think the people that are best equipped to help me with Congressional Dish are the people that listen to Congressional Dish. And if you've listened this far into this episode, this many thank yous, well, then you deserve to know that I am looking for someone right now. We can discuss payment, whatever you guys think is fair. You guys know how I operate, but I want to see some resumes. What I'm looking for is someone who's really organized, because when I'm doing these thank yous, I'm organizing all of the emails because I get emails that come in and telling me that donations have come in, and then I get separate emails talking about the donations from people that both contribute online and via paper checks. So I need to get all that organized into one sheet so that I can read this off as I'm doing the episode. And then there's also some organizational stuff that I need. So it's like when I go on another podcast, I need to know where the link is for that. And I'm completely disorganized with where I've been and when I've gone on what and when that's getting released. So I'm really looking for someone who's proven themselves to be an organizational master, really. And so if you would like this job right now, I mean, I did all this myself, and I'm going to say that all of it took me probably an extra 10 hours per episode. So that's pretty much what you're looking at. You're looking at 20 hours a month, but I can tell you that this job can and will grow, and I'm going to pay on an hourly rate, whatever you think is fair for the type of work that you'd be doing. So, but I do want to see some resumes, and I'd like to know why you're interested in doing this, because what I'm really looking for is someone I can depend on to be there for every single episode, to answer my emails quickly. If I have questions about, like, you know, did this person contribute this, or like, I need those answers. And so I'm really looking for someone that can kind of be on call to just help me with this stuff yeah, that's where we're at. Oh my God, I have an appearance in 15 minutes. I have to go. But yeah, so please email me your resumes, jen@congressionaldish.com. I am trying to have this person hired by the election, or even preferably faster. So early bird gets the job on this one. So please send your resumes to jen@congressionaldish.com. And I look forward to working hopefully with one of you, because I would so much rather work with someone who's already into this podcast than have to explain to a stranger what we do here. I just think that would be kind of hard. So as always, I appreciate the hell out of you guys. You're the only reason I can keep doing this. Yeah, I hope you guys have a really positive 2 weeks. I don't think watching anything about the election is going to help these 2 weeks be positive. So yeah, just try not to let this election get you down. And in the next episode, I'll tell you how we'll file all those clips. And the next episode will be a summary of the 114th Congress, because a lot of stuff went down and we should all just be reminded of it before we vote. And that'll be the last episode before the election. We're almost there, guys. And yeah, that's it. So much love. I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
We're surrounded now by liars coming at us through our TV screens.
We don't have a domestic spying program.
They're content to fight in black and white despite the many in-betweens. We got a president who plays with the facts. And then he waves a flag to cover his tracks. As if a lie is alright, if the end will justify the means. Now we are so damn tired of being lied to.
The polar ice caps aren't going away.
We don't think we can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it lies. But we're not keeping quiet anymore. We are so damn tired of being lied to.
Government jobs consume the profits of the private sector.
We don't think we can deny it anymore.